Lord of Mysteries, The Arrival of the New Black Emperor by author Huo Yang. Chapter 756-760. Temporary Tarot Club. Klein's body once again manifested a black cloak, beneath which was an illusory body, sometimes an illusory mask, sometimes a series of illusory doors, and sometimes an illusory monocle. He struggled in great pain while doing his best to suppress the celestial worthy's complete awakening. At this moment, the rules brass book in Hobert's hand once again became illusory, but the power of order was clearly unable to suppress the momentum of the celestial worthy's awakening. Dong! Dong! Hobert struck the order clock twice in quick succession, and Klein's will temporarily gained the upper hand again, his body solidifying once more. He immediately used the power of error on Amon's Sequence 1 clone. It turned out that Amon's true body had seemed to be ready for a desperate fight, but after throwing the uniqueness and Beander characteristic to Klein, it was left with only the empty shell of its main consciousness and thoughts. This empty shell immediately lunged at that Sequence 1 clone. Because the uniqueness and Beander characteristic, which contained the celestial worthy's spiritual imprint, were no longer within its body, Amon's state at this time actually became normal. He intended to utilize this Sequence 1 level clone to escape, and at the same time, rendezvous with another Sequence 1 level clone. If he succeeded, he would still be in King of Angels. However, Hobert, as the Black Emperor's God-level chaos, was still influencing that Sequence 1 level clone, so Aemon failed to escape immediately and was struck by Klein's error. This Aemon clone reverted back to Hobert's substitute, and the parasitic worm of time returned to the substitute's hand. Without the support it relied on, Aemon immediately began to collapse again. "All right, I lost this time, and I lost completely," Aemon said as his body became illusory. "Sometimes I really don't understand what you two are thinking. There's clearly no need to fight so desperately, so why do you insist on putting yourselves in such great danger?" "Because the rules of this universe are problematic, and we must make some changes," Hobert said coldly. "And gods like you can never risk changing those rules. Only when some changes occur can the lives and destinies of our friends, our relatives, and those ordinary people who never appear in your eyes, be completely changed." Regarding the point that gods like Aemon should not become outer deities, Hobert and Klein's thoughts were very consistent. Aemon shook his head. "All right, I really didn't quite understand what you meant." At this moment, his body completely collapsed and became illusory, finally disappearing entirely. Hobert finally breathed a sigh of relief. Although Aemon had not died, this opponent could no longer threaten them. Klein on the other side was still in great pain. Hobert struck the order clock again, but the effect was no longer as good as before. Klein pinched his forehead and said, "I might have to utilize a drop of River of Eternal Darkness as water to put the celestial worthy's consciousness to sleep, and I will also have to fall into a period of slumber." Hobert frowned and asked, "Then can the world still move freely?" After all that effort, had Klein's fate still not changed? Was this the influence of the celestial worthies, fate anchor, or a manifestation of Adam's ability? Klein felt his own state before saying, "He still can, but only at the King of Angels level." "That's good." Hobert smiled slightly. So, Klein's fate had still been forcefully altered somewhat, at least the world didn't have to fall asleep with him. He will walk in the world on my behalf, accumulating miracles, and maintaining humanity. Klein fully understood Hobert's meaning. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Now I finally understand the helplessness of the ancient sun god back then. Your situation is better than the ancient sun gods." Hobert smiled. "You still have friends to help you. When I become an outer deity, I should be able to utilize the order clock to completely help you suppress the celestial worthy's resurrection thoughts within you." Klein slowly nodded. "I look forward to that day." Then he added, "Next, I will hold an emergency tarot club meeting." Hobert dismissed his substitute that had just been parasitized by Aemon. "Good." With a wave of his hand, the worm of time Beander characteristic in the substitute's hand floated towards Klein. "This can indeed be given to Leonard to cultivate an opponent for Aemon." Klein gave a knowing smile. The two immediately left the depths of space before the outer gods discovered them. In the god-forsaken land, within the massive cross, behind the curtain of shadows, a young man with black hair, black eyes, and a broad forehead suddenly sat up. It was Aemon. Aemon, dressed in a classical black robe, stretched out his left hand, attempting to retrieve a monocle ground from crystal from the void. But this time, he got nothing. Adam's emotionless voice echoed in Amon's ears. Both of them have a persistence that transcends life, but for you, there is almost nothing worth caring about too much besides yourself. So you lost, and you lost completely. It was precisely because Adam helped stabilize his state that Amon dared to allow the initial awakening of the celestial worthy's will. Amon curled the corner of his mouth, seemingly wanting to respond with a smile, but found he couldn't. Adam's voice continued from the shadows. As a natural mythical creature, although you know what courage and sacrifice are, you find it very difficult to understand. Amon's expression changed slightly. He lowered his head and remained silent for a long while before suddenly looking up and saying, "Next, I plan to leave here and dive into the starry sky. It must be much more exciting and stimulating than the real world." Adam added, "Klein's summary of you is very thorough. It seems you had already prepared a fallback for yourself." He paused and then said, "However, it's very dangerous there. Before I succeed, I won't be able to provide any more help." Amon said nothing more and disappeared into the shadow curtain. Hobert had just returned to Anjou's palace and rested for a while before being pulled back into Saphira Castle. At this time, Klein, who had gone to Evernight Goddess's divine kingdom and retrieved the Erode's magic mirror, sat in fool's position, smiling as he watched the members appear one by one. The sudden summons clearly caught Justice Audrey and the others by surprise, leaving them somewhat bewildered and astonished. Even the most oblivious members among them sensed an uneasy atmosphere. Klein, now truly fool, said in a somewhat hoarse voice, "This is an emergency meeting." Audrey keenly detected from his voice that Mr. Fool was very tired. Then she noticed that Hobert, sitting opposite in the Emperor's position, also seemed very tired. 2 consecutive intense battles, coupled with the fact that Hobert's divinity was still somewhat active within him, would exhaust even a god. Combining this with the strange celestial phenomena that had appeared earlier, Audrey guessed that something major must have happened again in the Beander world. She looked around, then stood up as usual and bowed to the head of the mottled long table. "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool." After the greetings concluded, Klein said in a low voice, "I will enter slumber." Upon hearing this, the hanged man Alger and the other members felt their hearts sink, even feeling somewhat panicked, unclear why such a thing would happen. "This involves a war beyond sequence," Klein explained further. The other members then breathed a slight sigh of relief, especially Alger, who immediately thought, could this be a war in which Mr. Fool obtained the corresponding authority above sequence, and in this war, Mr. Fool successfully reclaimed his authority but had to rest for a period. Hermit Catlia, on the other hand, suspected, could it be that during the war, the aggregation of Beander characteristics put immense pressure on Mr. Fool's spirit, thus requiring slumber to alleviate it. Other members also had similar conjectures, based on what they encountered during their own advancements. Even at their current level, they would feel very tired immediately after advancing, let alone Mr. Fool who had reclaimed the authority of an outer deity. Although they weren't entirely sure if this was the correct answer, their panic had vanished without a trace. Klein looked around at the other members, then said, "Next, there is a long-term commission for all members. More widely proclaim my name, but do not conflict with the churches of the Orthodox gods. This will aid my awakening." He intended to increase the number of his anchors, which might help in his confrontation with the celestial worthy in the dream. "The reward will be the conveniences you have enjoyed in the past, the responses you have received, and the corresponding help you will receive when you pray in the future," Klein said unhurriedly. "After I fall into slumber, I can still respond to prayers to a certain extent. However, most of the time it would be the world responding to prayers, and the certain extent likely referred to what an king of angels could accomplish." The Tarot Club members present did not find Mr. Fool's request difficult. Most of them were already more or less spreading the faith of Fool. "Yes, Mr. Fool." Thus, the Tarot Club members accepted this long-term commission without any hesitation. Fool Klein nodded slightly and turned his gaze to Catlia. "The previous commission, collecting all kinds of information about the hidden sage suddenly coming back to life, is still valid. If key intelligence can be collected, the reward is one wish." Catlia was silent for a second or two before saying, "I accept this commission." Next, Klein issued tasks to the other members one by one. The son Derek's task was to protect New Silver City, and the reward was to become Fool's Deer. Magician Furza's task was to protect the Abraham family and prevent them from being tempted by the starry sky, and the reward was to help her prepare the Planeswalker's ritual. The Moon Emlin's task was to establish a pharmaceutical company to research how to mass-produce potions with miraculous effects, and the reward was also one wish. Star Leonard's task was to compose a poem praising Fool's deeds, which made Leonard a bit troubled, but he finally agreed, and the reward was also one wish. Justice Audrey's task was to actively approach the psychology alchemists, and if the time was right, she could control this organization with the help of the Emperor. The reward was still one wish. Fool didn't specify the hanged man Alger's task, he only said, after a while, you will know what your task is. The reward for Alger was the Sea God Scepter. Finally, when it came to Emperor, Klein said, your task? Well, not a task, but what you are about to do is key to whether I can awaken as soon as possible. Although it looks very dangerous and will have some twists and turns, you will definitely succeed. Hobert looked at Fool, is this a prophecy? No, this is a blessing, Klein still said slowly. After all, whether it was Fool or Error, they both possessed a certain authority over fate. Thank you, Hobert said. The other members all noticed that the tone of their conversation was more like friends, rather than the previous superior-subordinate relationship. After giving instructions to each member, Fool took a deep breath and said, after this, you can still gather here on the first Monday afternoon of every month, but there will no longer be a convener. My dear, the world will be the host of the gathering. The world immediately stood up and said, thank you for your trust. Fool Klein, however, smiled and said, just don't be misled by Adam again. The world Gehrman Sparrow immediately looked somewhat flustered, I won't. The other members first realized, Mr. Fool's humanity has increased before he falls into slumber. Then they were all very surprised, the world was once misled by Adam. Alger had already begun a series of conjectures because of this. More accurately, he must have been affected by Adam's ability, right? It must have been a certain error that appeared in the world that caused Fool and the Creator, two deities, to fall into a certain passive state. After the battle ended, Mr. Fool had no choice but to enter slumber. The reason for adding the Creator was because Alger also noticed that Emperor seemed a bit tired, and it was very likely that he, along with the Creator, also participated in Mr. Fool's battle to seize authority. The other members also had similar guesses, only Hobert knew that this was Klein performing a conversation with his puppet in front of himself to strengthen his own humanity. At the same time, it was also a jest about being ambushed by Adam previously. Fool Klein nodded to the world, this gathering ends here. The Tarot Club members couldn't help but feel a strange sadness, as if a grand ball had come to an end. Klein then said, every journey has an end, do not be sad, but look forward to the arrival of the next journey. The members stood up simultaneously and bowed solemnly to Fool, your will is our wish. Klein waited for them to finish speaking before releasing the maintenance, watching the deep red stars scatter. Finally, only the star representing Emperor did not immediately disperse. As a true god, Hobert could delay his departure. Friend, this is not a farewell. You are just going to rest for a while. Good luck. Klein smiled. Thank you. Hobert waved his hand and then left. The world, at the lower end of the bronze long table, also said, good luck. Klein hummed, waved his hand to summon Erod's magic mirror, and ascended the steps towards the strange glowing door with a dark green light. Arriving in front of the glowing door, he raised his head and looked at the transparent cocoons suspended on the glowing door. After sensing for a moment with closed eyes, Klein raised his right hand, and the cocoons shattered, the people inside turning into specks of light, flying out of Saphira Castle, and falling onto some recently deceased people in the real world. After doing this, Klein lowered his head, looked at the magic mirror in his palm, and asked, are you afraid? A pale word was outlined on the surface of the ancient silver mirror, no. The next second, Rhodes, following the rules, asked his question, Great Master, are you afraid? Klein's lips moved slightly, yes. After speaking, he strode forward, holding the magic mirror, and walked through the middle of the strange glowing door. His figure disappeared behind the door that concealed who knows what. Atlantis Empire, Anjou Imperial Palace. Hobert rose from his lounge and returned to his office. As he expected, the mature and languid Furs and the youthful and beautiful Audrey came one after another. At this time, both empresses had solemn expressions and some doubt in their eyes. "I know what you want to ask," Hobert said. Upon hearing this, the two empresses did not rush to ask questions but sat opposite Hobert's desk according to his gesture. "Error has fallen," Hobert explained. Furs and Audrey paused slightly, but they were not surprised by this. Because Fool must have seized Amon's related authority, which is why he had to enter slumber. "I need to rest for the next few days," Hobert said. "I will return to attend the celebration banquet." After unifying the South Continent, the entire imperial government was in saturated operation, until recently, when the various tasks finally became less busy than before. Therefore, the imperial government initiated a celebration banquet for the unification of the South Continent and His Majesty Emperor's ascension to the throne, and gave civil servants a day off to rest a bit. Audrey asked with some concern, "Did you also participate in the battle?" "Yes," Hobert said truthfully. "And I was somewhat affected. I need to find a quiet place to calm down." Upon hearing this, the two empresses relaxed slightly. Hobert only used the word, "calm down," so the problem should not be significant. Hobert chatted briefly with them for a couple more sentences, then used alter to change his own location and leave. The next second, Hobert appeared in his mausoleum from when he was promoted. All the prisoners of war, prisoners, and nobles who participated in the construction of the mausoleum had already been killed, and even their spiritual bodies were dispersed. Only some of Hobert's close confidants, after being hypnosis by Audrey, forgot about building the mausoleum for Emperor. So currently, Hobert's 9 mausoleums remain absolutely secret. In the quiet mausoleum, Hobert's somewhat restless mood quickly calmed down a lot. At the same time, there was also an amplify effect on the anchors here, instantly stabilizing Hobert's state. The reason Hobert felt tired before was that the divine nature, the part belonging to original creator, was originally dormant and did not give Hobert any mental pressure. Affected by the revival of heavenly venerate, that part of the will has now become active, and even a part of it seems to have been replaced by heavenly venerate. Hobert had to work hard to suppress it. Fortunately, Hobert's state had always been very good, and he had previously acted as Black Emperor. With the mausoleum helping to stabilize his state, he quickly suppressed the will of heavenly venerate. But Hobert still felt a very severe sense of fatigue. He had no choice but to enter a state of meditation, forcing himself to sleep and rest. At the same time, in the servants' quarters of the Atlantis Imperial Palace, Jeff, a second-class servant, suddenly sat up from his bed, then heard exclamations and the sound of someone falling around him. Jeff was stunned for a second or two, then obtained many memories about this world with only a north-south continent from the original owner's brain. For a moment, his lips curved. "I transmigrated." "Jeff, how do you feel?" a middle-aged man nearby asked, with a slight tremor in his voice. Jeff then noticed that there were several people standing around him, led by a middle-aged man, and several young people. Without exception, they all looked surprised, and 2 young people had just fallen down in fright because Jeff suddenly sat up. Jeff recalled that in the morning, a strange phenomenon suddenly appeared in the sky, and the entire sky became very bright. The original owner, therefore, accidentally lost his footing and fell into a secluded artificial lake. Because he couldn't swim, he quickly drowned. Thinking of this, Jeff coughed up a mouthful of water. "I'm fine." The middle-aged man paused for a moment, then seemed to suddenly remember something and said to a young man, Quick, go after Gree, who went to report the death. It's best if you can catch him, if not, explain clearly to Jeff's family." The palace doctor had already confirmed earlier that Jeff was near death. The middle-aged man, who was also Jeff's direct superior, then sent someone to report the death and prepared to have several young people send Jeff's body back. Just as they were about to lift the body, Jeff suddenly sat up. The middle-aged man patted Jeff's shoulder. "Take today off. Continue working tomorrow. Paul, stay by Jeff's side. If anything happens, come find me immediately." He was still a bit disbelieving that Jeff had come back to life just like that, so he had Paul stay by Jeff's side in case Jeff had any other problems. After everyone else went back to work, Jeff looked through the window at the buildings outside. How does it feel like living in a scenic area?" In his memory, this clearly seemed like a world with a British style and a technological level around World War I, so why were all the buildings outside Chinese style? As more and more memories surfaced in his mind, Jeff immediately realized, I'm not the only transmigrator. This senior who transmigrated earlier has actually become emperor. And he married two such beautiful empresses. Then he thought of the name Atlantis Empire. I didn't even notice just now, this is clearly a name that only a transmigrator would choose. It's like England, France, America, Intis, among them, Intis feels very abrupt, and Atlantis has the same abruptness in this world. So Jeff asked Paul next to him, how can I see Emperor? Paul paused for a full 2 or 3 seconds before saying, you have to find the head butler. The so-called head butler was the middle-aged man from before, a senior butler, which is to say, one of the head butlers in the imperial palace. Without another word, Jeff found the busy head butler and explained his purpose. The head butler, like Paul, was also stunned for a moment. Did the water you drank go into your brain? A second-class butler wants to see His Majesty Emperor. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Accommodating the country of disorder. Intis Republic, Trier. Today, the capital of the Intis Republic was deserted, with almost the entire city's population gathered on the boulevard, eagerly awaiting. According to reliable sources, Rosal II, a descendant of Emperor Rosal, was escorted back to the country by the Prime Minister of the Atlantis Empire and the Pope of the Full Church. Considering that the Atlantis Empire had already replaced the kings of Fenaport and Loan, people speculated that the return of Rosal II was another means for Atlantis to strengthen its control over the political landscape of the North Continent. But the public didn't care about that, they were more eager to catch a glimpse of Rosal II. According to popular lore, the reign of Emperor Rosal was the most glorious period for the Intis Republic. When facing difficulties, the elders would always sigh, if only the emperor were still alive. Now, it was said that the emperor's direct descendant had returned. The public, unlike the politicians, did not view this as a grave threat, they simply wanted to know if Rosal II could bring them hope. Finally, the motorcade escorting Rosal II arrived. People could hardly believe their eyes. In the motorcade, standing on the tram and waving to them, was a middle-aged man with chestnut hair, a delicate mustache, and dressed in splendid Intis-style formal attire. By steam, he looks just like the emperor himself. Someone said this first, and then everyone began to shout, "Long live the emperor! Long live the emperor!" In the past 2 years, they had endured too much political and military humiliation. In the previous World War, they had advanced all the way to Backland, only to inexplicably end in defeat. Nearly 2/3 of the Republic's elite troops had yet to return home. The war on the South Continent was also a disaster. Atlantis was just a duchy the size of a county 2 years ago, yet they fought against such a country and were defeated. They desperately hoped someone would change the current situation. Regardless of what Rosal II would do in the future, his mere appearance now had already given people immense hope. At this moment, many soldiers and police, seemingly from nowhere, rushed out of the crowd with weapons, pointing their guns at the motorcade and shouting, "Long live the Republic!" Or yelling, "We don't need an emperor." The Beyonders in the motorcade exited their vehicles, and the diplomatic personnel of the Atlantis Empire stepped forward to negotiate. Intis officials, observing from a distance on a high vantage point, exchanged knowing smiles. The scene became somewhat chaotic for a moment. While the diplomatic personnel were negotiating, Rosal calmly walked to the front, directly facing the black muzzles of the guns. "Shoot me, soldiers. Shoot your emperor. Shoot the great Intis." The hands of the soldiers and police began to tremble. A few soldiers were the first to put down their guns, standing on both sides of the road, willingly becoming Rosal's sentinels. The public was awed by the charisma of Rosal II, and burst into cheers again. After Rosal returned to the tram, he shouted with all his might, "Long live Intis! Long live the people!" The crowd erupted, many crying and pleading for Rosal to lead them out of their current predicament. When the motorcade arrived in front of the square, Rosal delivered a brief, impassioned speech. "The great Intis will not be defeated by war. In the future, it will still be the most dazzling nation. I have long said that the parliament's efficiency is too low. Look at Atlantis, we should adopt a more efficient political model. Every word he spoke drew cheers and applause from the crowd. With just one speech, Rosal immediately gained the support of the capital's people. Amidst shouts of, "Long live!" Rosal proceeded to his former imperial palace. On this day, Intis once again had an emperor. South continent, in the mountainous lake east of Anjou. Hobert slept for a while in the mausoleum and immediately felt refreshed, with the previous fatigue almost completely gone. However, the activity of his divinity still persisted, though it remained within a controllable range. Sitting on the exquisite throne, Hobert contemplated his next plan. Previously, his main energy was focused on how to become a Black Emperor, and he had only briefly considered how to become an Old One. Even Hobert himself hadn't expected that the opportunity for him to become an Old One was hidden within the act of helping Klein achieve godhood. Therefore, becoming an Old One would now be the goal he strived for. Moreover, for Hobert, the previous preparations were very thorough, which made the process of him becoming an Old One seem simpler than achieving godhood. In addition, the method for becoming the Anarchy had been deduced by the ancient sun god, and it would still be relatively safe even after becoming an Old One. Especially the Anarchy pathway, no Old One had left too much mental residue on it. Although, Celestial Worthy had made arrangements, his erosion was mainly in uncertain mist, not with the Anarchy. The Son of Chaos had not perished, so he didn't form many mental imprints, and his influence was very weak due to the Celestial Worthy's seal, which was better than if he had directly perished. Perhaps, apart from the original creator, this Old One pathway had no mental imprints, making it safer than the Omniscient and Almighty One and the Lord of the Mysteries. Thinking of this, Hobert sighed, because only up to the Anarchy step was safe. If he were to become a pillar, that would be a very difficult process. First, he would have to integrate with uncertain mist, which meant he might have to constantly contend with the will of Celestial Worthy. And accommodating the Son of Chaos would be even more difficult. Even Celestial Worthy couldn't tear off a portion of the characteristic within him. How would he tear it off after becoming an Old One? If he couldn't separate them, he would surely become a mental-stitched monster of Hobert and the Son of Chaos. Thinking of this, Hobert was not discouraged, because he could get help from Klein. When fully awakened, he would most likely be able to merge with Saphira Castle and become the complete Lord of the Mysteries, at which point there would be more room for maneuver. Therefore, after becoming an Old One, the optimal solution was to first try to awaken Fool. Thinking of this, Hobert re-entered the country of the Anarchy, sensing the subtle association between this Saphira and himself. His previous challenge to the irrationality of Celestial Worthy, and the essence of Beander characteristic had made his spirituality even more compatible with the country of the Anarchy. This was the opportunity to accommodate the country of the Anarchy. At the same time, Hobert gained a deep understanding of the authority of the Anarchy. If the authority of the Black Emperor was alter, then the authority of the Anarchy should be change. Alter means a change based on a previous foundation, while change means a very significant, even unrecognizable, change based on the original foundation. Additionally, change sounds very radical. It must involve some deep-seated transformation to be called change. This made Hobert associate it with the word challenge. Generally speaking, it is only by successfully challenging the original rules that deep-seated changes can occur. This authority seems to be somewhat anomalous among Old Ones. Other Old Ones often represent the authority of a certain domain, while the Anarchy, theoretically, should represent the domain of rules and laws. However, his ability is to change these laws and rules, which is tantamount to making his own domain undergo certain changes. Hobert thought to himself, perhaps, change is the true domain and abstract meaning of the Anarchy. At the same time, Hobert realized that his current method of becoming an Old One should be the optimal one. Normally, the best way to become an Old One is to first become a true god of a pathway, then accommodate the Saphira, and then collect the uniqueness and Beander characteristic of other pathways. But there is also an optimal option within this, for example, the Omniscient and Almighty One becoming the pillar of an Old One through the visionary pathway is the best of the best options. Similarly, other Old Ones should also have such situations. Hobert believes that becoming a Black Emperor first should be the best way to become the Anarchy. The full name of the Anarchy is, the Anarchy, Order Shadow. This sounds more like a description of the Black Emperor, and the description of the Justiciar is not as obvious. Hobert thought to himself, I don't know if this is fate's arrangement, or a happy accident. Thinking of this, Hobert, sitting on the Iron Throne, decided to try to accommodate the country of the Anarchy now, while his condition was good. At this time, in the country of the Anarchy, in the small town not far from the Divine Kingdom, there were no longer any outsiders, all the workers were Hobert's substitutes. Currently, Hobert temporarily stopped the Meander communication business, and prayer-based reporting business. For safety, he also recalled all his substitutes. Because Hobert could feel the attraction of the rules brass book to him, in order to prevent the uniqueness and Meander characteristic of the Justiciar pathway from being drawn into his body immediately after accommodating the country of the Anarchy, he simply placed the Justiciar uniqueness and Meander characteristic stored in the country of the Anarchy into his mausoleum. For Hobert, he currently had ample time to first digest the country of the Anarchy, and then, after adjusting his state, to accommodate the uniqueness and Meander characteristic of the Justiciar pathway. Finally, Hobert even properly sealed all the sealed artifact, Meander characteristic, Meander creature corpses or materials, etc., that he had in the country of the Anarchy and placed them in different rooms within the mausoleum. If it can be more secure, then be more secure. Because of the protection of the mausoleum's mysterious characteristic, and the sealing, it was almost impossible for other gods to discover it, so there was no fear of it being snatched away. The accommodation began. Hobert diffused his spirituality. Because he had already initially controlled the country of the Anarchy and had a strong affinity with this Sephira, Hobert easily allowed his spirituality to spread to every corner of the country of the Anarchy. There was no ready-made reference for how to specifically accommodate it, he had only heard a description of this type from Adam. It was somewhat like accommodating uniqueness. Therefore, Hobert designed several plans, and for now, he could only try them one by one. First, he tried the simplest method, utilize spirituality to grasp the Sephira and contain it within himself. But he quickly found that this wouldn't work, because the country of the Anarchy remained unmoved. Hobert began to try the second plan, merging his spirituality with the country of the Anarchy, but this plan also quickly met with some obstruction. At the moment of fusion, Hobert realized that the country of the Anarchy had both illusory and abstract parts. Spirituality seemed to be able to merge with the illusory part, but it was obstructed by the abstract part. This exceeded all his previous contingency plans. Hobert pondered for a moment and then had a new idea. While continuing to merge his spirituality with the country of the Anarchy, he used the Black Emperor's ability to constantly alter and distortion everything within the country of the Anarchy. The Divine Kingdom, which he had previously designed to be like a fairyland, was instantly crushed and compressed by him, forming a reaction similar to nuclear fusion, releasing immense energy that destroyed everything except the order clock, mountains, lakes, and so on, in an instant. The abstract part of the country of disorder indeed showed signs of loosening. Hobert knew his approach was correct. While spiritually fusing with the country of the Anarchy, he also needed to continuously utilize the Black Emperor authority to make the country of disorder change. Only then could the Black Emperor authority and the abstract part begin to merge with the abstract part of the country of the Anarchy. Thus, the country of the Anarchy, which had been utterly destroyed, continuously underwent changes. After being crushed and compressed, dust and some molecular structures gradually appeared. Gradually, rocks and soil formed, as did water droplets and living organisms. At the same time, the country of disorder had already begun to merge with Hobert. This feeling was extremely painful, as if someone had opened his chest and stuffed some extremely cold and unfamiliar things into his chest and abdomen. This feeling was indeed somewhat similar to accommodating a uniqueness. In fact, he had almost no sense of pain, but this pain was a pain in the essence of the nerves, or rather, not a pain of touch, but a pain of the brain's sensation. But now that the accommodation had begun, he had to grit his teeth and persevere. Hobert continued to accommodate the Sephira, little by little, and perceived that his authority was undergoing subtle changes, which proved that the fusion of the abstract part was also proceeding steadily. The country of disorder continued to change, with soil and rocks forming new mountains and new terrain. Water droplets gradually formed rivers and lakes, and plants instantly spread throughout the entire country of the anarchy, once again forming a small ecosystem. At the same time, Hobert's fusion with the country of disorder also reached its final stage. He felt his chest was about to burst and wanted to stop and rest. However, Hobert could no longer control it. The country of disorder was already entering Hobert's body on its own. This speed became faster and faster. Just as Hobert trembled in pain, his vision darkened as if he was about to faint. Suddenly, this painful feeling ended. The country of disorder had completely merged into Hobert's body. Only the order clock became illusory, appearing behind Hobert. It belonged to a part of the original creator, and of course, no true God could accommodate it. But it re-entered the country of disorder, and did not affect Hobert's final fusion with the country of the anarchy. At this moment, Hobert was numb all over, his eyes tightly closed, as if countless fine needles were passing through his body. He seemed to have no change, but in fact, he had been pierced through by these fine needles and could not move at all. Gradually, this extreme discomfort weakened. Hobert suddenly opened his eyes. In his eyes, there seemed to be two swirling clouds. The clouds were fleeting, and Hobert's eyes quickly returned to their pitch-black color. He saw nothing around him, it was a void. This was the former location of the country of the anarchy, neither the real world nor the spirit world or the starry sky. Hobert couldn't explain where this was, nor was he even sure if he was in some space. There was no time here, no gravity, no electromagnetic force, or other four fundamental forces of nature. There was nothing at all, a complete void. But Hobert was not lonely here, because at this moment, in his chest, there was a small world with high mountains, flowing water, and a cloud-shrouded divine kingdom. In the divine kingdom, there was a heavy and ancient bell. It was the country of the anarchy. At this moment, Hobert was the country of the anarchy, and the country of disorder was Hobert. In this extremely quiet place, Hobert began to examine his state. He found that he had undergone considerable changes. At this moment, he no longer had any human body structure, he was completely a combination of Sephira and a god. That is to say, even if he were to be attacked in some way at present, unless there was a way to separate him from the Sephira, he would not suffer any harm. Hobert didn't know if this was a good thing or a bad thing, because at the same time, he also felt himself becoming colder. This indifference was not due to the strengthening of divinity, but because he clearly felt that he was becoming more abstract, losing his sense of identity and feeling as a human, as a living being. Just as a person would not have a sense of identity or empathy for a rock or a small blade of grass. This was the price of becoming half an old one, because old ones were already at the top of the entire universe, with little connection to living beings. Fortunately, Hobert still maintained his emotions and thoughts, but he felt that in the future, he would be more like playing the role of the king of Atlantis. He would be more like the high and mighty, the creator, rather than Hobert. Immediately, Hobert realized that after becoming an old one, he would also have to split off in King of Angels' avatar to continuously gain humanity and emotional warmth in Atlantis. And most of his divinity could remain high above, staying in the country of disorder, to be the creator. This way, a subtle balance could always be achieved. Hobert sighed. This might be the inescapable fate of an old one. Immediately after, Hobert suddenly thought that before this, on earth, only God and heavenly venerable had become complete old ones and pillars. The ancient sun god of the third epoch, due to the resurrection of God, did not fully accommodate the chaos sea, and could not be considered a complete old one. In other words, up until now, no creature on earth had become a true old one. Although the outer gods were all old ones, or once were old ones, they were most likely formed by the Sephira, developing a certain consciousness under the relevant laws of Beander characteristic. Therefore, their state should be more similar to God and heavenly venerable, rather than the state of the ancient sun god and Klein. One major difference here is that Klein, before falling into slumber, still had a pursuit higher than life. The ancient sun god also considered how to maintain humanity after becoming an old one. It can be said that Hobert's current good state is largely due to the ancient sun god's previous deductions. However, these old ones did not have such thoughts. They were more like the inherent ideas of Beander characteristic, aggregation, distortion, and madness. Such old ones, of course, would not care about their human parts, nor would they worry about how much harm their actions would bring to living beings. They were single-minded in their desire to become stronger, constantly wanting to accommodate Saphira and characteristic with similar authority. They were even colder than Aemon, at least Aemon still considered strengthening his human part. Regarding methods for maintaining humanity, the ancient sun god had already conducted some experiments in the third epoch. First, it was to utilize an avatar closely connected to himself to strengthen his human part. Secondly, it was to expel some Beander characteristic to reduce his own burden. Hobert considered that he did not have characteristics from non-adjacent pathways within his body, and the anarchy only had 2 pathways instead of 5, so the latter 2 methods were currently optional for him. But using a substitute to strengthen humanity should be a very practical method. Thinking of this, Hobert felt that his state had basically stabilized, so he prepared to return to the real world. With a thought, he had already returned to his mausoleum. The Rules brass book, and the 3 portions of Hand of Order characteristic immediately moved closer to Hobert as expected. Hobert raised a hand and added a seal to them. Finally, the aggregation process between the Beander characteristic stopped. He planned to first adapt to the state of coexisting with the country of the anarchy, and then proceed to accommodate the uniqueness and characteristic of the Justiciar pathway. Inside Anjou Palace. Today, Audrey was in charge of the sealed artifact, Jinn. Because of Fool's resealing, this sealed artifact showed almost no living characteristics. However, Audrey and Furs were still very carefully observing the Jinn while in charge of this sealed artifact. Audrey, who was working, felt a spiritual sensation and looked up at the low table where the Jinn was placed. The Jinn's position seemed to have changed. Audrey carefully checked and confirmed that it had indeed moved a few centimeters to the east. Although such a movement was basically negligible, it could not escape the eyes of a spectator demigod. At this moment, the Jinn was resting quietly on the table as usual, like a uniquely shaped small teapot. After observing for a while, Audrey saw that the Jinn had no other reaction, so she continued her work. She guessed that something must have stimulated the Jinn just now, but now the Jinn had calmed down. Before any other reaction, she could ignore it, as long as she remembered to tell Hobert about it afterward. Soon, it was 10 o'clock in the morning. With the help of her maid, Audrey changed into a formal dress and put on light makeup, then attended the celebration reception held in the main hall of the palace. On the way to the reception, Audrey met Hobert, who had already returned. The two had just chatted for a few sentences when they met the other queen, Furs. While heading to the venue, Hobert said, "You two should be promoted to Sequence 3. He performed an altar on their surroundings, and the servants around them would completely ignore their conversation. Audrey and Furs were both stunned. Audrey spoke first, "My promotion ritual isn't ready yet." "There's no need to prepare a ritual," Hobert smiled. "Nor do you need any auxiliary materials. You just need to hold a Sequence 3 level Beander characteristic, and I can make you successfully promoted." This was an altar to their state, but because there was a Sequence 3 level characteristic as support, after the altar, they truly transitioned from Sequence 4 to Sequence 3. If there were no Beander characteristic to support them, they could also become Sequence 3 for a period of time. Theoretically, they could even become Sequence 1 for a few days. However, this was, after all, forcibly raising their level through Beander abilities, and there would definitely be a certain price to pay, so it was best not to utilize it if possible. With Beander characteristic, Hobert could even help them directly ascend to Angel. However, also for safety reasons, it was better to utilize the normal method for promotion when ascending to Angel. Furs, on the other hand, said, "I haven't completely digested the potion yet." Hobert raised a hand and altered Furs's potion digestion progress. Now, if facing an opponent at the true god level, Hobert's altar on the target had a time limit, but if the target was merely a demigod, as long as Hobert did not actively lift the altar, it would be permanently effective. Furs sighed, "To be honest, Hobert, your current ability is a bit terrifying." Hobert said seriously, "Only by becoming stronger can I protect you all, and protect the Empire." Furs and Audrey exchanged glances, both saying nothing. So the three of them arrived at the venue together and jointly announced the start of the reception. At the reception, officials of all levels toasted Hobert. He was also very generous today, drinking whenever he was toasted, and taking big gulps. Soon, he himself had drunk 2 bottles of wine. Audrey and Furs both sensed that something was wrong. They both suspected whether Hobert had suffered some injury in the previous battle, which was why he was in such a poor state. Donna also noticed something was amiss and said to everyone, "His Majesty the Emperor is also very happy today, but he has already had a lot to drink. Everyone, just come to congratulate him, there's no need to toast anymore." Only then did everyone stop toasting. After collectively expressing their respect to Hobert, the reception officially began, and the atmosphere gradually became lively. Hobert chatted with a few dignitaries for a few more sentences, then waved to Donna. The brother and sister went to the less crowded balcony to drink and chat. Hobert asked, "What are your thoughts on Beander matters?" Donna smiled and countered, "I heard that once you become an angel, you won't age anymore." "Yes," Hobert said. "Actually, some Sequence 3 Beyonders don't age anymore, but their sequence is not adjacent to yours. Then I need to advance quickly, striving to stop aging before I turn 30. But Donna then expressed some worry. "I also heard that after becoming a Sequence 4 Beander, every advancement is extremely dangerous." Hobert nodded. "That's true, but you don't need to worry about that. No deity would bother with a minor matter like a demigod's advancement, but Hobert was different. When Audrey, Furs, and Donna advanced, Hobert would definitely be by their side. For the current Hobert, as long as the advancer didn't instantly lose control or suffer mental death, he could easily save them." Donna took a small sip of red wine. "That's good then." Hobert then asked, "Does City of Silver have any needs recently?" "They are basically self-sufficient now," Donna replied. "Have you been in contact with Derek recently?" Donna smiled somewhat helplessly. "That kid Tyrone must have tattled on me to you." Hobert also laughed. "I just wanted to hear your opinion of Derek. I just feel that if I'm with him, I probably won't be deceived." Donna thought for a moment before saying, "In all my years of working, I've met many excellent men. Some are ambitious, some are diligent, and some are good at sweet talking. Being with such people always makes one feel a bit uneasy. Derek is a bit different. You say he's stupid, but most of the time he seems very smart. You say he's smart, but sometimes he's so tongue-tied it's infuriating." Hobert looked at the radiant smile on his sister's face and nodded slightly. "I understand." At this moment, he suddenly noticed that a male servant was leaving his post and coming towards them. Hobert was initially vigilant, but quickly realized that the other party was not a Beander, so he withdrew his spirituality. The head butler, who was not far away, quickly came over, as if to stop that male servant. Several guards responsible for security also realized that something was wrong with the male servant and were coming to intercept him. The male servant Jeff, in his desperation, shouted to Hobert, "The Heavenly King covers the Earth Tiger." Hobert was slightly stunned because the other party was speaking in Mandarin. The guards didn't understand what he was saying and thought it was some kind of spell. Beander attacks were immediately thrown towards Jeff. Jeff's thoughts were instantly distorted, and he blacked out and fainted on the ground. Generally, when Beander power of this level is used on ordinary people, their thoughts are easily distorted into a mess, and fainting is a stress response. Then a restraint completely sealed Jeff. Hobert had not intervened to stop it, partly because he wanted this fellow countryman to experience the taste of Beander attacks in this world, and partly because he was thinking about a problem. Before this, Hobert had already forgotten about it. Before Klein entered his slumber, he released a group of people from the Ad era from Saphira Castle. The name, Atlantis, and the elf architectural style, and elf-flavored food, popular in this empire would definitely make some transmigrators contact the Emperor of Atlantis, in various ways. Hobert was already considering whether to establish a liaison officer. If transmigrators came to seek refuge with him, how should these people be arranged? Watching the male servant being taken away by 2 Beyonders, Hobert suddenly had some ideas. He waved to Zio, who was beside Furs. Zio quickly came over and immediately said, "I will investigate the mastermind." "No," Hobert said. "I will have him sent to the grassroots level of Atlantis later to become a village chief." You send people to secretly monitor him. Whether he runs away or works diligently, do not let him discover your surveillance. Only when he encounters danger or is about to leave Atlantis should you intervene and send him back to the village to continue being the village chief. Until he is a qualified town government chief, then bring him to see me. He did this hoping that the transmigrators would carefully observe this world and realize the tremendous changes happening in Atlantis. He believed that with their abilities, if they adapted to the environment, they would quickly become town government chiefs. And by working in the town government, they would be able to read newspapers daily and internal imperial briefings weekly, giving them a certain understanding of this world. Then, when he talked to them, there would be no generation gap. Of course, this was for transmigrators who had just transmigrated and contacted him. If a transmigrator had already transmigrated for some time and had adapted to life in this world, Hobert would naturally receive them in a different way. Zio was slightly stunned when she heard this. After agreeing, she couldn't help but guess the identity of the male servant. This was just a small interlude and did not affect the progress of the entire banquet. On the afternoon of the day the banquet ended, with Hobert's help, Audrey and Furs successively advanced to Sequence 3 and began to prepare for the ritual of becoming an angel. Relatively speaking, Audrey's ritual was slightly simpler. She needed to utilize observation to find an angel's weakness, and then utilize this weakness to weave a special dream, leaving a severe psychological shadow on that angel. Or, utilize observation to find a common psychological weakness among people in a large city, and then weave a dream in which all the citizens in the city participate, leaving them with psychological shadows. Whether it was an angel or a city, relatively speaking, this ritual had room for maneuver. If Hobert gave the order for the angels from the 4 North Continent nations to come to Anjou for Audrey to observe, they would certainly rush over eagerly. As for creating a severe psychological shadow for a certain angel, it could be fully compensated with some benefits or Beander characteristic. Furs's ritual was a bit more troublesome, leaving legends in 9 places outside of Earth. First, she needed to find planets with 9 extraterrestrial civilizations. This search alone was very dangerous, because extraterrestrial civilizations were very likely to worship outer gods, and she could easily be targeted by outer gods during the search. Secondly, leaving legends would take a lot of time. Hobert suggested that Furs go to the Abraham family to look for any relevant information on extraterrestrial civilizations. And he warned Furs that she must wait for some time before going to the starry sky. Only when Hobert became an old one could he protect Furs from being corrupted by outer gods in the starry sky. As for leaving legends, she could pray to Fool and ask him to fooling the people of that planet, so that the planet would instantly have some legends about Furs. Anyway, Fool had also promised to help Furs prepare for the ritual. After helping the 2 queens complete their advancement, Hobert also helped 2 of his subordinates advance to angels. They were Archibald, who advanced to Miracle Invoker, and Dophus, who advanced to Death Consul. On the day Archibald advanced, the people living along the Intersea coast witnessed a miracle. It was early morning. Fishermen had just launched their boats, workers had just started their shifts, and farmers had just arrived at their fields. At this moment, the Intersea suddenly seemed to boil, with the seawater churning and making terrifying noises. Immediately after, strange phenomena appeared in the sky. One part of the sky was covered in dark clouds, with lightning and thunder. Another part was bathed in sunlight, as if it were already noon. Another part was sparkling with starlight, as if night had fallen, and there was also a part of the sky with a beautiful twilight. At the same time, some illusions also appeared on the sea surface: a tall tower made of stacked books, a huge tree that seemed to reach the sky, a distorted, illusory city, and a dim-looking cross. After this anomaly appeared and disappeared, a huge ancient ruin emerged on the sea surface. It was not an illusion, but a real ruin, St. Yadro City, where most of the buildings had collapsed, and only a few main buildings remained intact, the former capital of the Solomon Empire. The ruins, buried in history for over 1,000 years, suddenly returned to the real world at this moment. Amidst people's disbelief, it quickly sank again, and finally, only the tops of a few tall, uncollapsed buildings were still exposed above the sea. After a long while, people came back to their senses. Some bravely rowed over to investigate. They saw that a huge cluster of ruins had appeared underwater in the Intersea. At the same time, from this day on, a new profession emerged around the Intersea, deep-sea treasure hunter. Along with this huge ruin, a large number of antiques from the Fourth Epoch also appeared. This was, of course, the result of Hobert using his ability to integrate all the divine power that maintained the city's hidden existence into his Twilight Scepter. After accommodating the country of the anarchy, Hobert could now contain all power belonging to the essence, or rather, this was a kind of overflow of divine power. The overflow of Beyonder abilities would appear at the demigod level, but the overflow of divine power had a long-lasting effect. If there was no intervention of power at the divine level, such an overflow would not disappear for thousands of years. These powers were not Beyonder characteristic, they could only display certain angel-level abilities during a certain period, but for Hobert's utilize ability, they would have a considerable bonus. So Hobert renamed the Twilight Scepter to Scepter of the Song of Gods, and put it back into the country of the anarchy. The appearance of St. Yadros city constituted the ritual of bringing a lost history back to the present, and Archibald thus completed his advancement. After Medici went to Intis, the main leaders of the Atlantis army became Archibald and Seal. Currently, this is the first military angel. Dophus's advancement was not so troublesome, it was mainly completed in his own mausoleum in the underworld. After Hobert helped him complete the ritual, he transferred him from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to the official Beyonder system. Previously, Dophus was in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs mainly because of his connections in the South Continent and his understanding of the South Continent. Now that the entire South Continent was Atlantis territory, Dophus no longer needed to serve in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thus, Atlantis entered the Seven Angels era, namely Conqueror Medici, Balancer Christine, Duke of Entropy Beverly, Weather Warlock Raymond, Ancient Bane Sharon, Miracle Invoker Archibald, and Death Consul Dophus. The fall of the original witch. Just now, Mr. Fool bestowed a divine oracle, informing Alger that the seal on the West Continent had loosened. Alger, dressed in papal vestments and wearing a silver-black mask, immediately understood his mission. Soon, the divine emissary Danitz hurried in. Your Holiness, the Storm Church has sent an envoy with 2 gifts to congratulate you on becoming the god's representative. As he spoke, he held a white tin box and handed it to Alger. Alger nodded slightly, and with a gentle grab towards the box, it was immediately swept up by a storm and flew into his hand. He slowly opened the container and saw a book bound with yellowish-brown parchment inside. On the surface of the book, a line of words was written in Elvish, Book of Catastrophes. Although he had already guessed, Alger still felt a moment of trance. Soon, he asked Danitz, what is the second gift? It's a ghost ship called the Blue Avenger, already docked in the harbor. Alger was slightly stunned and immediately went to the window. Indeed, he saw a not very large, somewhat old ship in the harbor. He calmly instructed the divine emissary Danitz, send a letter back to the Storm Church on my behalf, thanking them for their gifts. Then Alger added, Divine Emissary, I have received Mr. Fool's divine oracle. Next, I will go to complete a mission he assigned, and I might not return for several years. Divine oracle. Danitz was somewhat surprised. Why hadn't he received one? Alger continued, Mr. Fool is about to enter slumber. However, this will not affect your ability to receive responses through prayer. After I leave, the church's affairs will be handed over to Elder Derek Berg of City of Silver. If there are matters you cannot resolve, pray to Gehrman Sparrow. Additionally, record in the scriptures that the sea god is Mr. Fool's from God, and ensure all believers accept this. Our faith is key to Mr. Fool's awakening. As his divine emissary, you must set an example in this regard. All of this happened so suddenly that Danitz felt a bit dizzy, but he quickly understood the seriousness of the matter. All right. A few days later, at the bustling docks of New Silver City, Alger looked up at Derek, who was quite a bit taller than him. The Sea God Church is now entrusted to you. Derek subconsciously wanted to raise his hand to scratch his head again but ultimately restrained himself. Then, Your Holiness Wilson, when will you be able to return? Alger shook his head and said, everything ahead is unknown. No one can say for sure. After speaking, he turned to board the ghost ship but suddenly froze, looking at the 3-masted ship and the few crew members on its deck. Alger felt something in his heart and looked down at himself. He was wearing a linen shirt, a brown jacket, and wide-legged trousers popular in the Rorstad archipelago, with a special leather belt wrapped around his waist. Alger's lips curved slightly upward. He suddenly rose with the wind and landed on the deck of the Blue Avenger, looking at the boundless blue sea, set sail. On the last day of July, Hobert stood at the edge of the Antarctic, gazing at the dark land. The last time he came, it was polar night, and it was still polar night this time. The entire continent looked dark, giving a sense of a forbidden zone of life. Ever since Hobert's apotheosis ritual ended, he had wanted to visit the primordial demoness. But because he had never been confident, he only came to the Antarctic to find the primordial demoness now, after accommodating the country of disorder. Upon returning to the massive ice wall structure where the primordial demoness was previously discovered, there was no life left here, only the statue of the outer god, still enduring the cold and the ice and snow. Standing on the high ice wall, Hobert extended his spirituality throughout the Antarctic. Due to the special nature of the Antarctic, exploring in this way would certainly yield nothing. But Hobert had a plan. He took an Beander characteristic of the demoness of catastrophe from the country of disorder and used this characteristic to perform an association. Although he didn't find any clues for a while, Hobert was not discouraged and continued to perform the association. He was very certain that at his current level, using an angel-level Beander characteristic to perform an association with the deity of this sequence was only a matter of time. If it were just the Black Emperor, Hobert wouldn't be so sure, but he was now half an old one. This was not a physical association, but an association in the authority sense. Unless the primordial demoness was no longer a true god, or she was no longer on the witch sequence. After associating for more than 10 seconds, Hobert disappeared from his spot and appeared in the astral world. It turned out that the primordial demoness also knew that with Hobert's usual style, he would definitely pursue her, so she simply left the Antarctic and hid in the astral world. This made it easier for Hobert to find her. There was no ice and snow of the Antarctic to hinder him here, and the primordial demoness's advantage here was not great. At first glance, the astral world was similar to the spirit world, also divided into two parts by the barrier formed by the original creator. There was the part with Earth and the part outside Earth. However, there seemed to be no strange creatures in the astral world. All directions were filled with a starry sky, appearing boundless and even so vast that there was no sense of direction. Given the primordial demoness's poor state, she certainly dared not stay in the astral world outside Earth for a long time, otherwise, her Beander characteristic might be seized by an outer god. After another search, Hobert finally only found a very ancient-looking mirror. This made him frown, because the angel-level Beander characteristic in his hand had been pointing to this mirror all along. This was somewhat beyond Hobert's expectation. Could it be that this mirror was very special to the primordial demoness? Otherwise, how could it deceive his association? Hobert used this mirror to perform an association with the primordial demoness, but it failed. This was a peculiar mirror, it couldn't associate with anything. He walked around the mirror once. Under the dim starlight, the ancient mirror reflected specks of starlight, much like a scene from a sci-fi movie Hobert had watched. In the vast universe, there was something that did not belong to the universe, reflecting the faint light of the starry sky. There was nothing inside the ancient mirror, not even Hobert's reflection. This made Hobert recall a dream he had a long time ago. In that dream, he also didn't see himself in the mirror, and a few days later, he encountered the primordial demoness. At the time, Hobert thought that the mirror that didn't reflect him and the beautiful female ghost were his spirituality reminding him that he was about to encounter the primordial demoness, whom he couldn't deal with at the time. But he didn't expect that the dream seemed to have other implications. Standing in front of the ancient mirror, Hobert recalled the dream again, but he didn't recall any clues. Hobert stood close to the mirror, expecting the primordial demoness to reach out from the mirror and ambush him. But nothing happened. Because he was close enough, Hobert could feel the ancient and heavy aura of this mirror. This aura was actually somewhat similar to the order clock. He immediately thought of the demoness sect's propaganda about Cheek, the first and last born from the creator's body, the true inheritor of the creator. This propaganda was a bit boastful. In Hobert's opinion, the inheritors of the original creator were more like the omniscient and almighty one and the Lord of the Mysteries. The son of chaos was also more like an inheritor than Cheek. The first and last was very likely an exaggerated description of the corresponding authority, and as for the so-called inheritor, Hobert guessed, could it be that Cheek once inherited something from the original creator? And the thing Cheek inherited was this mirror in front of him. Of course, this item must have been modified by Cheek. After all, the original creator's specific life form was full of uncertainty, so it couldn't have used a mirror. Thinking of this, Hobert's main body, hidden inside the country of disorder, immediately rang the order clock. Dong! The ancient mirror in front of him immediately cracked and then completely shattered in the next second. Hobert was slightly stunned. This mirror didn't seem to be inherited from the original creator. Otherwise, why would it shatter with one shake? Immediately after, the Beander characteristic in the substitute's hand began to associate with a new target again. Without time to think, Hobert was about to go with the substitute when thick, python-like strands of hair extended out from the broken mirror. At this moment, the eyes at the top of these hairs were all open, and Hobert's substitute was covered with a thin layer of gray, as if it was about to be petrified in the next second. Clearly, the primordial demoness saw that her setup had not stopped Hobert, so she simply took the initiative to attack. Hobert's substitute's body immediately expanded, transforming into a tall and mighty figure, wearing exquisite armor and a handsome cloak behind him. Mystical symbols, constantly changing, surrounded his body, giving off a sacred yet distorted beauty. The substitute in its mythological creature state raised a hand towards the mirror fragments, dragging the primordial demoness, who had countless python-like hairs, out of the mirror. This very beautiful deity, like a tall giant, looked into the substitute's eyes with her illusory, beautiful eyes. In the substitute's eyes, the astral world suddenly collapsed, deities fell from above, and outer gods invaded. This was a scene of doomsday, causing a severe impact on the substitute's mind, leaving it standing motionless. Hobert's main body ignored the substitute. He raised a hand towards the primordial demoness, and the python-like strands of hair on Cheek's head suddenly turned into rags. Hobert changed the primordial demoness's head into a broken mop. Cheek stiffened all over, standing there like a mop handle. In the next instant, Hobert used the power of the country of disorder to amplify the ability of the order-slaying sword, turning a single order-slaying sword into a rain of swords. Boom! The sword rain struck Cheek, emitting a violent explosion. It was as if the order-slaying sword, after striking the primordial demoness, launched a more ferocious attack in the form of self-destruction. But soon, Cheek, with a mop head on her shoulder, responded. With a whoosh, she turned into a very ancient-looking mirror, shattered into pieces by the order-slaying sword rain. Not far away, the primordial demoness's main body, which had just appeared, also immediately exploded into dust. It turned out that Hobert had used his level 2 change the rules of the mirror substitute ability. As long as the mirror substitute was hit, it was equivalent to hitting the main body. Looking at the primordial demoness, who had turned into dust, Hobert couldn't help but frown, feeling that the primordial demoness was even weaker than she appeared. But in the next second, an ancient mirror appeared above the dust, and within it was a projection of Cheek. The primordial demoness, who had already turned to ash, immediately reformed and became a complete Cheek again. At this moment, the mirror Cheek said to Hobert expressionlessly, "Even the 7 deities couldn't kill me back then. Do you really think you can kill me by yourself?" Hobert did not look at the ancient mirror and fell into thought, while the doppelganger, who had just recovered, continued to entangle with the primordial demoness in the astral world. The mirror Cheek did not attack Hobert, but merely stared at Hobert's main body. After about 2 or 3 seconds, Hobert suddenly said, "I understand. I understand how the witch pathway revives. Before, when I was killing the demoness of undying, I thought it was their spiritual bodies returning to arrangements like puppets to complete the revival process. Now it seems that's not the case. They must have placed a part of themselves in the mirror world, which is connected to a special mirror. When they die, their spiritual bodies fly into that mirror, merge with the part inside the mirror, and then return from the mirror world to the real world, completing the recovery of their Beander characteristic. And when it comes to deities of this pathway, they should be completely split into 2, with a mirror Cheek and a real Cheek. Because your condition is not good, the real Cheek is not in a good state, but the mirror Cheek seems to be doing quite well. This is also why some deities know your condition is very poor, while others know your condition isn't that bad, because they didn't encounter the same cheek. Of course, this point doesn't escape the eyes of deities, but they don't have the habit of explaining to their believers or others. They only give a reminder: the primordial demoness's condition is not that bad. He finally understood the dream's hint to him. The person in the mirror was the key. The mirror cheek, lacking the aura of a living person, said, "What can you do even if you know? Even if you become an old one, you won't be able to completely kill me. No, you don't understand the terror of an old one at all." Hobert curled his lips. If the mirror world is completely destroyed, the mirror cheek will also be gone. Before the mirror cheek could say anything more, Hobert's main body suddenly expanded, transforming into an emperor with a cloak and exquisite armor, like his doppelganger, as if on a battlefield. But unlike the doppelganger, an illusory wonderland appeared behind his main body, where clouds and mist swirled, with high platforms, pavilions, and flowing water floating in midair. Within the pavilions, a faint, ancient giant clock could be seen, like an eye that disdained everything. Every breath Hobert took caused the rules of the entire astral world to shift. Around him, some rules underwent severe distortion, while others became iron laws that no deity could ever alter. In a breath, Hobert, in his half-old one-level mythical creature state, had already entered the mirror. The mirror cheek turned to leave, but was still a step too late. Several whirlpools seemed to appear on her left side, becoming extremely distorted, with many parts twisted like a pretzel. Her right side, meanwhile, became obscure and difficult to discern, as if returning to a chaotic state without any rules. In the mirror world, Hobert was like a massive gravitational source suddenly appearing in a nebula. The surroundings immediately underwent intense distortion, deformation, and collapse. Cheek desperately wanted to escape. Her snake-like hair on her head stretched out like tentacles, trying to extend in the opposite direction of Hobert. But it was completely useless. She was like a satellite captured by Hobert. No matter if she used various doppelgangers, turned into stone, cursed Hobert, or transformed into an abstract apocalypse, she couldn't escape. Hobert took a small step forward, and Cheek was immediately torn to shreds by the surging power he unleashed. At this instant, a phantom black light burst out from the mirror Cheek's body, and in the blink of an eye, it fled into the depths of the mirror world. Although Cheek wasn't completely dead yet, under Hobert's attack, the mirror Cheek's condition was also very poor. Hobert strode forward, quickly catching up. Behind him, the rules belonging to the mirror world completely collapsed, and the corresponding space also collapsed and crumbled, returning to nothingness. Crash. The sudden sound of shattering startled Furs, who had just woken up. The mirror on her dressing table and the full-length mirror in the corner of her room shattered without warning, scattering glass shards everywhere. In terms of mysticism, a mirror shattering for no reason is a very ominous sign. At this moment, she heard exclamations outside. Her spirituality had a premonition, so she immediately put on a coat and used her flash ability to check her surroundings. All the mirrors and glass windows in the entire palace had shattered. She went to other places to look, and all the mirrors in Anjou had also shattered. Furs performed a divination and breathed a slight sigh of relief. According to her divination results, this was indeed a very ominous sign, but the object of the danger was not the Atlantis Empire. The mirror Cheek was no longer in sight, but Hobert was not in a hurry. He continued to advance unhurriedly. Wherever he passed, the mirror world completely collapsed, and along with it, the symbolic meaning of the mirror world also collapsed. Crash. Sharon, in Utopia Town, glanced at the mirror in her room. That mirror shattered without any warning. Then, a bad premonition appeared in her spirituality. She immediately tried to enter the mirror world, but found that the mirror world had disappeared. Continuing forward, the mirror world before Hobert became obscure and difficult to discern. At this moment, witches rushed out from the obscurity, transforming into balls of frost, attempting to freeze Hobert. But they were torn apart by pure, surging power before they could reach Hobert, their screams rising and falling. Hobert took out the scepter of the Song of Deities from the country of disorder. The top of the multicolored, intertwined scepter immediately emitted an extremely bright light. The obscurity was dispelled, and a colossal black mirror appeared before Hobert. On the scepter of the Song of Deities, a small sun seemed to appear, filling the dark mirror with light. Hobert flicked the scepter, and the small sun floated into the air, immediately collapsing and undergoing a violent, nuclear fusion reaction. The mirror world was different from the real world, there wasn't even air here. But Hobert altered the corresponding natural laws, and the nuclear explosion could still generate a huge impact, shattering that colossal black mirror. Crash. Sarin Island, in the northwest of the Rorstad archipelago, was the last stronghold of the demonist sect. There was still one demigod and several middle sequence beyonders here. But just now, this stronghold and the entire island were instantly engulfed in flames. The bright light from the mirror appeared without warning, igniting everything within sight. The witches who saw that strong light were directly burned to ashes. The last force of the demonist sect was thus annihilated. Intis, Trier. Residents in front of mirrors throughout the city witnessed astonishing scenes. The scenes in the mirrors were actually different from the real world. The residents inside were fleeing in panic, as if something terrifying was chasing them, but soon, their front also seemed to be a dead end, and they were utterly despairing. But at this moment, they seemed to remember something and looked in the direction of the mirror. The residents in front of the mirrors felt their gaze and understood clearly that they were preparing to escape from the mirror into the real world. Crash. Just as the people in the real world felt their scalps tingle, the mirror shattered, and no one managed to escape. At the same time, in the White Maple Palace, Rosal stood in front of a shattered full-length mirror, lost in thought. Just now, he had actually seen a version of himself in women's clothing appear in the mirror. The female Rosal was desperately trying to escape from a long corridor into the real world, but soon, that long corridor collapsed, and the full-length mirror shattered. However, the other party's despair and panic still resonated emotionally with Rosal. After a long moment, Rosal finally said, "What the hell?" The colossal black mirror shattered, and Hobert was slightly stunned by the scene before him. Before him was an endless wall composed of individual squares. In each square sat a male or female stone statue, and in some places, a seemingly normal person sat. At the very top of this wall was a short-haired man who bore some resemblance to the primordial demoness. He sat there, eyes closed, with an ancient mirror behind him. That was Cheek. Hobert immediately understood that each person sitting here corresponded to a witch, or rather, a witch, of the Witcher higher sequence. Especially these males, they were the true selves of their gender-changed witches. Upon advancing to demoness of undying, the witch, in the real world could establish a connection with the self here, allowing them to revive repeatedly using the self here. And those who had turned into stone statues were witches, who had already died, but in this Beander world, they still retained some imprints. At this moment, the male Cheek, sitting at the highest point, opened his eyes. His gaze also lacked the aura of a living person. All the stone statues in the squares began to move, rushing towards Hobert. Some turned into mudslides, some into falling meteorites, some into volcanic eruptions, some into blizzards. All sorts of such disasters surged towards Hobert. A black hole formed at Hobert's fingertip, sucking all the disasters into it, and the endless disasters vanished without a trace. The next second, Hobert appeared before the male Cheek. Rest in peace. The male Cheek was very strange. Why must kill me? He seemed to have not spoken for a long time, and his tongue was not obeying him. Hobert said faintly, "Because you are a malicious witch. But my pathway is the apocalypse. You only become the apocalypse if you want to become the apocalypse." Hobert said, "Only the original creator can bring about the true apocalypse. You are not qualified enough." He extended his left hand and clenched his fist fiercely, his power tearing the male Cheek to shreds. A dark light immediately dissipated from the ancient mirror behind him. The primordial demoness, Cheek, fell. Tarot club without fools. Hobert watched the male Cheek in front of him turn into nothingness, and his spirituality sensed that Cheek still had arrangements for resurrection. However, after resurrection, he should at most only be at the angel level, and would require certain trigger mechanisms, so there was no need to worry. Immediately after, Hobert looked at the ancient mirror behind Cheek. It indeed had the shape of a mirror, but it gave people the illusion that it was not a human product. He touched it with his spirituality, and waves of inspiration came, allowing him to perceive ancient pieces of information. This mirror truly came from the Creator. If understood through the structure of the human body, it was like a piece of cartilage from the Creator, the kind of cartilage found between bones. Because it was between bones, it formed a mirror world that resembled a crevice. This was the abstract meaning of the ancient mirror. However, this structure also happened to possess the authority to project images. From this perspective, it was more like the retina of the Creator. Hobert could thus confirm that the Creator did not possess a human form, otherwise the parts on him, when Hobert understood them from a human perspective, would not have such vastly different dual meanings. Of course, it was more likely that the Creator was an abstract life form, and even if he had a human form, his internal life form could not be understood. Hobert understood this perfectly. After accommodating the country of the anarchy, his own life form could no longer be understood by human cognition. It could only be analogized with human organs, but it could not be precisely described. Hobert dispelled his mythical creature state and touched the ancient mirror surface with his hand. Instantly, he felt that he had gained the authority to reconstruct the mirror world. At the same time, he also perceived that this authority was triggered by the Black Emperor pathway and the Sephira, country of the anarchy, or more simply, the Sephira and Beander characteristic of the Son of Chaos. Even primordial demoness could only construct a secret space like a kingdom of gods in the mirror world. She never completely mastered this mirror from beginning to end, otherwise she would be an invincible existence in the mirror world. Hobert smiled. It seems that the Son of Chaos did not lie in some places. The anarchy indeed has the authority of transformation, and there is also a very close connection between the Son of Chaos and the Creator. Taking a deep breath, Hobert held the ancient mirror, and in his other hand, he held the scepter of the gods. The already collapsed mirror world immediately underwent drastic changes. For 1 or 2 minutes before and after the fall of primordial demoness, the entire world was plunged into panic. According to later statistics, 80% of mirrors on the north-south continent suddenly shattered. The remaining 20% of mirrors also lost all their mirror functions. For example, river water no longer reflected the scenery on both banks. For example, mirrors hanging on walls showed nothing, just emptiness. The panic among ordinary people was that there seemed to be nothing in this world that could show them their own appearance. This would have a huge impact on ordinary people's self-perception. The panic among Beyonders was that all abilities related to mirrors became ineffective, such as mirror divination, mirror jumping, and so on. The Beyander world would experience a huge void. Sharon, an ancient Bane, gradually calmed down after her initial worry. She could sense that the mirror world had undergone tremendous changes, but such changes were only temporary. According to the relevant laws of the Beyander world, even if the mirror world perished for some reason, it could spontaneously reconstruct itself after a period of time. However, the reconstructed mirror world would definitely be full of unknowns and very dangerous. Just as she thought of this, Sharon's spirituality sensed something, and the mirror world reopened its door to Beyonders. At the same time, mirrors all over the world returned to normal. Sharon stood in front of a shattered mirror for a while, not feeling any danger from the mirror world, so she leapt into the mirror world. The sight before her greatly surprised Sharon. Clearly, this place had been reconstructed by a mighty power. Most of the passages in the original mirror world were very narrow, and many dark and obscure places hid various dangers. But now, the mirror world had become wide and bright. It was a scene of the sky. Clouds hovered all around, whether up, down, left, or right, as if this was a world belonging to the sky. There was no sun, no starry sky here, but the sunset and starlight converged, making it magnificent. In the sky as far as the eye could see, there were 3 huge landmasses suspended at different time periods, and on these landmasses, floating mirrors appeared. According to Sharon's intuition, the mirror world during twilight was absolutely safe, while the mirror world during nighttime had a certain degree of danger, or rather, had the probability of creating some terrifying consequences. And the mirror world, under a thunder and lightning-filled dark cloud, was very dangerous. All creatures coming to the mirror world should try their best not to approach. Sharon could assert that someone, no, a god must have transformed the mirror world just now, changing the dark and obscure, oppressive, and full of unknown, mysterious, and dangerous mirror world into a mirror world where safety and danger were clear at a glance, and which had beautiful scenery. Holding the ancient mirror and the scepter of the gods, Hobert stood at the very top of the mirror world and nodded in satisfaction at his masterpiece. Although the mirror world, after his transformation, still had parts that were insane and distorted, at his current level, he could already concentrate all this madness and distortion, stacking it together, without affecting the overall beauty of the mirror world. Putting away the scepter in this ancient mirror, Hobert suddenly thought of the meaning of his authority to change the status quo of the Meander. For example, the original mirror world was purely formed spontaneously under the influence of the Meander, which is why it had a state where danger and safety coexisted, and distortion and normalcy were present together. But now it was different. Hobert separated the safe and normal spaces from the dangerous and distorted spaces. Danger and distortion still existed, but they were easier to avoid than before. Leaving the mirror world, Hobert returned to the astral world. The real Cheek, who had been entangled with his substitute here, had turned into a stone statue. His Meander characteristic and uniqueness had also been extracted, sealed, and picked up by the substitute. After Hobert completely shattered the stone statue, he took over the uniqueness and Meander characteristic, finding almost no pollution or aura of the Sephira on the uniqueness. This was consistent with the intelligence obtained earlier. The City of Calamity, due to some experiments by the deceased war god Badhail, began to affect high-sequence Beyonders and the uniqueness of the Hunter pathway. However, the Witch pathway seemed not to have been greatly affected. Then Hobert suddenly had a thought: I wonder if I can transform the starry sky now. He immediately tried, but quickly found that without a medium like the ancient mirror, he could only transform the astral world within a certain area, and it was also time-limited. Hobert shook his head with a smile. Transformation is addictive. Putting away the uniqueness and Meander characteristic, Hobert returned to Anjou Palace and began to plan his next hunt. In a blink of an eye, it was August 3rd, the first Monday of the month. Around 2:50 p.m., Hobert arrived at Audrey's bedchamber to accompany her to the Tarot Club. Audrey smiled. I'm actually a little nervous about attending this meeting. She casually performed a psychological analysis on herself and found that the reason for her nervousness was worry. What if the Tarot Club did not convene as scheduled after 3 o'clock? Hobert patted the back of her hand. Don't be nervous. I heard that Mr. Fool is still responding normally to the prayers of his main believers. He said that since he said the meeting would be held today, it definitely will be. Then he brought up another topic. Is there any news about the psychology alchemists? Actually, I can contact them at any time, Audrey said, but I'm still waiting for an opportunity, or rather, the opportunity and reason for creation are still in progress. Audrey could still contact the psychology alchemists' liaisons, even before Herwin Lambus, a former member of the psychology alchemists' deliberation committee, was eliminated by Hobert. But without a good reason, in the eyes of Beyonders of the spectator pathway, Audrey's contact would definitely be very suspicious. Audrey further explained, the collapse of the giant dragon statue in Hydelic Village is a very good starting point. I heard about this and writing a letter to inquire with the church is a good reason. But I need to spread the news that I am very curious about this issue to Backlund through a very natural channel first, and then writing the letter would seem very reasonable. Hobert smiled. Now when I hear reasonable in connection with spectator, I feel like it's a very terrifying thing. Just as they were talking, their vision was covered by gray fog, and they arrived at the hall that seemed prepared for giants, on both sides of the mottled bronze long table. All members subconsciously looked towards the head of the bronze long table. When they saw that the seat there was empty, they could not hide their disappointment. In fact, everyone knew very well that they would not see Mr. Fool at today's Tarot Club, but facing this reality, everyone still felt a little lost. All right, let's begin, said Gehrman Sparrow, the world, who was sitting at the very end. Audrey, Justice, still stood up and greeted everyone in order of their joining the Tarot Club, starting from Alger, the hanged man. Everyone also smiled and greeted this beautiful noble lady, as if they had recaptured the feeling of attending the Tarot Club before. Emlyn, The moon was the first to clear his throat and say, I think everyone must have the same question as me. A few days ago, why did all the mirrors, or rather, mirror surfaces, in the world become abnormal? They either shattered on their own or lost their function as mirrors. This process lasted for about 2 minutes, and then the mirror surfaces completely returned to normal. The other members immediately looked at the moon. As Emlyn said, this was a common question in everyone's mind, and also a question they wanted to discuss at the Tarot Club. Katlia, hermit, then said, I used some secret arts to explore the mirror world that had returned to normal, and found that it was completely new, no longer the cramped and obscure mirror world it once was. Leonard, Starr, also said, we speculate that a god must have reshaped the mirror world. Currently, Leonard had already been promoted to Bishop of Dread, an important figure in the Divine Council, and was very aware of the Church's research on the changes in the mirror world. I do know some inside information, Hobert said with a smile. Everyone's reaction greatly satisfied his vanity, and he felt his humanity become much more lively. The other members all looked at Emperor. They really couldn't imagine what connection Emperor or the Creator had with the mirror world. Seeing that his words had attracted everyone's attention, Hobert continued, the reason why the mirror world changed is because the Creator and primordial demoness had a fierce battle at that time. Emlyn nodded, so that's it. This explained it. A god had fought in the mirror world, which caused the abnormality of mirrors all over the world. Leonard sighed, the battles between gods are too terrifying. They can have such a huge impact on a global scale. Alger was about to ask about the outcome, but Hobert continued, on that day, primordial demoness fell, and the Creator transformed the mirror world. This news exploded like a thunderclap in the hall. The other members, including even the world, were too stunned to speak for 2 or 3 seconds afterwards. A god had just fallen. Although primordial demoness was an evil god, she was still a god. She just fell like that. Audrey was the first to react, no wonder. Also on that day, many members of the Witch Research Association experienced spiritual instability and their condition suddenly deteriorated significantly. But after that day, everything seemed to return to normal. After a few more seconds, Alger cleared his throat and asked, has primordial demoness completely fallen? She should still have means of resurrection, Hobert replied. According to investigations over the past few days, I found that on some remote islands in the Rorstad archipelago, there is still faith in primordial demoness. However, even if primordial demoness successfully revives, she will only be at the angel level. To be honest, I'm actually hoping she revives quickly. That way, primordial demoness could be completely eliminated. Everyone nodded slowly. The fact that gods had means of resurrection seemed not too surprising. Katlia then said, recently, the frequency of divine battles seems a bit high. Starting from October last year, a divine battle first occurred that affected the direction of the entire world war, and war god fell in that battle. Not long ago, Mr. Fool seized the corresponding authority, and a divine battle also occurred. Only about half a month later, another divine battle occurred between the Creator and primordial demoness, leading to the fall of primordial demoness. The world also joined the topic, the apocalypse is near, and the gods are also making preparations. At this time, the world's external image was Gehrman Sparrow, and only in Utopia was he Klein's image. He was at the King of Angels level of the seer pathway, and was the most loyal angel to Fool. He was once an adventurer, and also a former great detective and Nighthawks member. Because he possessed rich humanity, when he walked among humans, he could trigger more humanity, thereby making his main body's humanity more active. The world's reminder made everyone silent. Even the gods were preparing for the apocalypse, what could they do? Hobert, however, said, it's not entirely about preparation. It's mainly because, Witch, has been our enemy for a long time, and now that the Creator has reclaimed some authority, we simply decided to eliminate the leader of our enemies completely. The leader of the enemies. The other members exchanged glances. This description left them speechless. Hobert added, additionally, when the Creator and Mr. Fool reclaimed their authorities, primordial demoness tried to stop them separately. Even during the decisive battle between Atlantis and the Pa Kingdom, she was supporting the Pa Kingdom. If there was an opportunity, the Creator would naturally eliminate such an opponent. The world was slightly stunned, then hidden sage. Hobert smiled. In my opinion, his current situation is also very dangerous. Everyone was startled. This meant that the Creator's former enemies, or rather, those God-level enemies, would all be targets of the Creator. This was a hunt for evil gods. Thinking of this, everyone instinctively shivered. That was a hunt for gods. It sounded easy, but such a thought was too blasphemous to the gods. Since the topic had turned to hidden sage, Hobert casually asked Katlia, I heard that the Moses ascetic order doesn't have a fixed headquarters. Katlia was slightly taken aback and hesitated for a moment before saying, that's right. There are also gatherings among the ascetics, and the convener is an angel. We all have corresponding informational avatars with that angel. Each gathering takes place in a corner of this world, where we manipulate our informational avatars to attend. The meeting locations are sometimes at the bottom of the sea, sometimes inside a mountain, and sometimes in the wilderness. There's no fixed spot. The only constant is that we always gather before an illusory building with several colossal stone pillars. That is the Moses ascetic order's holy temple, said to be the dwelling of a god. She explained in such detail because she realized that the Moses ascetic order might suddenly cease to exist one day in the future, so keeping such matters confidential was pointless. The other members imagined the Moses ascetic order's gathering process, feeling it was somewhat similar to the Tarot Club, yet seemingly not as high-end as the Tarot Club. After all, informational avatars must be very blurry and lack any sensation, far from the members of the Tarot Club, who give a solid impression, as if their true selves are participating in the gathering. Moreover, the Moses ascetic order's gathering place clearly did not give off the same mysterious and powerful feeling as Mr. Fool's Divine Kingdom. Hobert nodded. Thank you for your explanation. Katlia smiled helplessly. You're welcome. At this moment, the world added, I remember that cosmic dark side also appeared during Mr. Fool's battle to reclaim his authority. Another god, or rather, another evil god. That's right, but this evil god is relatively difficult to deal with, Hobert said. I heard that it has completely fled into the starry sky and is currently seeking the protection of Mother Tree of Desire. He did indeed hear this news. It was information transmitted to him by Farbati, and theoretically, it should be relatively accurate intelligence. Therefore, Hobert would likely only consider him after becoming an old one. Audrey voiced the question in her heart. In this tug of war, did Farbati lose? Did cosmic dark side completely side with Mother Tree of Desire? In my opinion, cosmic dark side has long been dominated by Mother Tree of Desire, only able to form Farbati's last line of defense, Hobert said. Currently, Farbati's state is acceptable in dreams, but it becomes very poor upon entering the real world. During Mr. Fool's battle to reclaim his authority, Farbati took a risk and showed his stance, leaving the battlefield of the God War with Abyss. Mother Tree of Desire should be able to seize this opportunity to completely seize control of Cosmic Dark Side. That's why Cosmic Dark Side entered the starry sky. Magician Furs also joined the topic. Demon Monarch Farbati has completely split into two gods. Did Cosmic Dark Side take away a portion of the Abyss Pathway's Beander characteristic? She had also come into contact with Farbati on the Full Moon Lake West Bank, and the oil painting containing Farbati's dream is still under her control. However, Hobert had resealed it, so Farbati could no longer influence Furs through that oil painting. Hobert explained. Everyone should have heard that the avatar ability of the demon pathway allows one to transform into a viscous black liquid for a certain period. It is said that high-level demons also possess the ability to transform into desires, using emotions like desire to create an avatar similar to a shadow. I believe that Cosmic Dark Side, in the very beginning, should have been a unique avatar of Farbati. Because it needed to deceive Mother Tree of Desire, this avatar was very special, even mystically pointing to Farbati himself. But now, this avatar has completely betrayed Farbati. Hobert was already planning to help this Demon Monarch, otherwise, once Cosmic Dark Side completely fell into the hands of Mother Tree of Desire, Farbati probably wouldn't last much longer. He continued, there might be Beander characteristics within Cosmic Dark Side, but after killing it, these Beander characteristics should all be reclaimed by Farbati. So it should be safe with Mother Tree of Desire. Hobert paused then explained, In my view, these Beander characteristics are very much like a certain shared usage between it and Farbati, with abyss as the medium. At the same time, both of them can basically reach the level of a true god by utilizing abyss, but they are both slightly weaker than the well-conditioned orthodox gods. To put it further, this is an application of a pathway's abstract authority and its actual existing entity. Just like the moon pathway, besides the uniqueness of this pathway, there is also the real moon in the night sky, and their mystical meanings are almost the same. And in this world, there is indeed the existence of abyss, and at the same time, abyss also has abstract authority. These were some inspirations Hobert gained recently after accommodating Country of the Anarchy. After accommodating the Sephira, Hobert found it easier to find ideas when considering abstract problems. This proved that Hobert was also becoming more abstract, and his thought patterns were gradually drifting away from those of normal living beings. Fortunately, Hobert's anchors were very stable, and his humanity had always remained in good condition. Furs slowly nodded, immediately understanding the state between Farbati and cosmic dark side. The other members listened very attentively. This was extremely high-level intelligence in the Beander world. At this point, the topic concluded. Everyone felt a great deal of emotion about this, feeling that in the near future, they were very likely to witness an era where the fall of gods would be a common occurrence. Thinking about this, everyone felt a little panic. This was the apocalypse, where even the fall of gods might become the norm. Hobert waited for everyone to lament for a while before asking, "The world, can we communicate privately?" "Yes, we can," the world replied. "Mr. Fool has granted me the corresponding authority." Hobert nodded. "I'd like to speak with you privately." The world hummed, and under his manipulation, a communication space was established between the two of them. In the space with only the two of them, Hobert went straight to the point. "Last week, a strange thing happened. A transmigrator actually sought me out." He knew the answer, but at this moment, he could only pretend to be confused. Our transmigrations are all arrangements made by the old ones. Why are there new transmigrators now? The world smiled. In this castle, there were once many souls from the Ad era imprisoned, but before Fool fell into slumber, he released them all. Hobert took a deep breath. Roughly how many? Dozens. Hobert shook his head with a laugh. This is a group transmigration, damn it. The world pondered for a moment before saying, they were released by Fool, and have been hanging around in Sephira Castle for so long. Their destinies should have established a profound connection with Sephira Castle, and they should encounter Tarot Club members one after another. Hobert leaned back in his chair. For me, they are very useful talents, but I'm just afraid that they will have great ambitions because they transmigrated with such difficulty, making them hard to control. I'm not too worried about that, the world said in a hoarse voice. This world, after all, possesses Beander power. They should quickly recognize the reality. Since they came to seek refuge with you, they should have had basic psychological preparation. Hobert, however, said, no matter what, once they arrive, I'll have to give them a good talking to. If they haven't recognized the reality, I'll send them to experience things at the grassroots level. Then he brought up another topic. I told you before that the outer god, son of chaos, was sealed by celestial worthy, and became the sealed artifact, Jinn. I recently received definite intelligence that there is still a portion of Beander characteristic within the son of chaos, inside the Jinn. Those Beander characteristics seem to be its core authority. I plan to try to devour son of chaos, after devouring uncertain mist, after some time. But a crucial problem is that even celestial worthy, back then couldn't strip away that portion of son of chaos' characteristics. I might have to devour son of chaos' consciousness along with it. That will certainly be very dangerous. If son of chaos' consciousness gains the upper hand, all my previous efforts will have been in vain. Hobert paused slightly, then continued, these past 2 days, I suddenly thought of a method. At that time, I can ask Fool to fooling son of chaos, for me, to see if it can voluntarily give up those Beander characteristics. Celestial worthy might have tried this method too. If it doesn't work, I can lower son of chaos' intelligence and devour it while it's foolish. The world was stunned for a moment, then said, your idea, surprisingly, aligns with some of my true body's current thoughts. At this point, he first explained, I can also receive some of my true body's thoughts currently. Then, the world, continued the previous topic, the true body has also been considering recently, trying to, fooling, celestial worthy, mind, making, celestial worthy, believe that he is Klein, thus achieving some kind of, consensus. It's just that, celestial worthy, is not that easy to, fooling, so such a, consensus, is still very difficult to achieve at the moment. Hobert pondered for a moment before saying, that's a very good idea. I plan to devour uncertain mist first, and then I can try it out on him. Then he added, after, fool, awakens, I can also utilize my authority to try and make, celestial worthy's consciousness submit. The world, suddenly chuckled, I almost forgot, you are the strongest support. Hobert also laughed along, I'm quite clear that you are the best at, bluffing, people. The two looked at each other and smiled, but their smiles gradually faded. Although they had a good idea, the road ahead still looked very difficult. After the private communication space was lifted, the hall was quiet for a while before, the son, Derek said, Mr. Emperor, Mr. The World, I have a question I'd like to ask. Some time ago, when the entire sky became very bright, was that a consequence of Mr. Fool's war to reclaim his authority? At that time, most parts of the north-south continent were indeed daytime, but that brightness was very abnormal, much like the entire sky was obscured by the sun, and the original sun could not be clearly seen where it was. Katlia and the others all looked at the world. They had the same question at the previous tarot club, but that meeting was not suitable for asking such a question, so they had kept it in their hearts. Audrey and Furs had already inquired about relevant information from Hobert and knew the general situation of the God War at that time. They were not very interested in this question. That's right, the world replied. That dazzling light was emitted by Adam. The strong light that illuminated even the astral world was an authority he conceptualized. Regarding this, after Klein became a god, his spirituality instantly completed the relevant seer, allowing him to roughly understand the ancient sun god's operation. But, the world, did not intend to explain too clearly, only explaining, he and, true creator, once held back eternal blazing sun, storm of Lord, and God of knowledge and wisdom. Everyone was stunned, not expecting that these orthodox gods had also participated in the war. Immediately after, Emlyn asked again, Mr. The World, which gods participated in the battle at that time? The World replied, all the gods in the real world participated in the God War at that time. The other members exchanged surprised glances, they had not expected this God War to be so intense. Originally, they had thought that the two warring parties were, Fool, and, the Creator, against Amen. When they just heard that, Primordial Demoness, Hidden Sage, and, Cosmic Dark Side, also participated in the God War, they were already very surprised. But they hadn't expected even more gods to participate. Upon hearing the world's answer, Katlia immediately thought, the Creator and Mr. Fool might have primarily countered Amen, while Adam and, true Creator, dealt with eternal blazing sun, storm of Lord, and God of knowledge and wisdom. The three evil gods mentioned by Emperor, and, the world, Primordial Demoness, Hidden Sage, and, Cosmic Dark Side, were respectively dealt with by Evernight Goddess, Earth Mother, and God of Steam and Machinery. In terms of numbers, they matched up. Emlyn asked again, why did all the gods participate in the war? Is it because they all dislike Amen? This question was not very suitable for the world to answer, so Hobert replied, that might be a factor, but it's not the main reason. The gods participated because the orthodox gods all supported Mr. Fool becoming an Old One, while Adam and the others supported Amen becoming an Old One. Similarly, Hobert did not intend to explain what a pillar was to everyone. The other members were all slightly stunned upon hearing this answer. Alger thought to himself, I didn't expect that even at the level of gods, one still has to take sides. That's right, after all, there's still, above the gods. The sun, Derek thought to himself, in the end, Mr. Fool won, and Amen lost, which also means the orthodox gods achieved victory. This topic temporarily came to an end here. Hobert suddenly said to Derek, I obtained a sealed artifact corresponding to Light Seeker. Are you interested in becoming an angel? That sealed artifact was offered to Hobert by the Loan Kingdom in exchange for one of their angels returning to Loan. Emlyn, next to Derek, thought to himself, who wouldn't be interested in that? The other members inwardly sighed with emotion. All member angels is not far off. They did not know that Hobert had already prepared the characteristics for Justice and Magician to become angels. If the transaction with Derek was also completed, then all member angels would only be a matter of time. The son was somewhat excited, but then remembering his special status, he questioned the world with his eyes. Don't feel any psychological burden, Hobert said. Giving you this Beander characteristic is a personal transaction between me and you, and it has nothing to do with our two factions. Everyone was slightly stunned, realizing that this transaction seemed a bit different from previous ones. Although the world was not clear about Hobert's specific plans, since Hobert had said so, he naturally wouldn't obstruct it. So he said to Derek, in that case, it's up to your personal decision, you don't need to seek my opinion. The son nodded and said to Hobert, Mr. Emperor, of course I am willing to become an angel. Hobert hummed, at the next gathering, I will give you the Justice Mentor potion formula. When your ritual preparations are almost complete, I will then give you the Beander characteristic. With Derek's sincere thanks, this round of angel-level transactions concluded. Next, everyone shared some recent experiences, and when they had chatted enough, the Tarot Club concluded under the moderation of the world. The Fall of the Hidden Sage. Audrey, as a dream weaver, easily sent Hobert into the dream world. In fact, given Hobert's current level, it would be quite easy for him to enter a dream on his own. He would only need to alter the state and thoughts of someone nearby, making them instantly fall asleep and dream. Then, he could utilize that person's dream to jump into the dream world. However, Hobert currently wanted to strengthen his humanity and interact more with those around him, especially the two queens, so he asked Audrey for help. Audrey was very happy to be able to help the high-sequence Hobert. This kind of feedback was positive feedback, and also helped Hobert maintain his humanity. After Hobert entered the bizarre dream world, he shouted loudly, Farbati. With that shout, many discordant and colorful places in the dream suddenly paused, then quickly hid as if mice seeing a cat. These places were hidden dangers within the dream world. Some were unknown fears, some were the manifestation of Beander distortion and madness in dreams, and some were mental projections of terrifying existences within dreams. Normally, they would not actively affect others' dreams, but if someone accidentally encountered them in a dream, most of the time they would have a nightmare, and in a few cases, it would lead to catastrophic consequences. Hobert had only shouted a single word just now and had not used any Beander ability. And the evasion of these things was only because Hobert's terrifying level made these dangerous parts of the dream realize the danger, so they quickly hid. 1 or 2 seconds later, the dream in front of Hobert was covered by thick grass. Immediately afterwards, not far in front of him, a Gothic hall rose from the ground, and Farboti's human form, a tall, thin middle-aged man, stood at the entrance of the hall. His current state was worse than before. Even in the dream world, he dared not leave that hall. Hobert extended his right hand, and a small mirror appeared in his hand. He gently threw it towards Farbati, and the next second, the mirror was already in Farboti's hand. I have built a hidden space for you in the mirror world. Hobert said, if the people sent by Mother Tree of Desire find you, hide in that hidden space. Hide for a while longer, and I will help you eliminate cosmic dark side. I believe you have already found clues to the tenebrous world. Now that the West Continent's seal has loosened, become an old one as soon as possible and participate in the battle against the outer gods. Farbati caressed the mirror in his hand and let out a long sigh of relief, thank you. In the past few days, there had already been some strangers at the entrance of the hall. It was estimated that it wouldn't be long before the Mother Tree of Desire's deer could utilize cosmic dark side to find him. I'm not helping you for free, Hobert added. In the future, you will take all the demons to live on another planet. I know that even without you, humanity has a wicked side, but at the same time, humanity also has a beautiful side. Your existence will make that fragmented beautiful side even more pale and powerless. Farbati agreed almost without hesitation, no problem. As he spoke, he gave Hobert a mass of his blood. This blood would allow Hobert to relatively easily find cosmic dark side, and of course, also easily locate the demon monarch. This was another declaration from Farbati. From the moment Hobert appeared in the dream, he knew he had made the right gamble earlier. In a blink of an eye, it was September. On a peak at the edge of Star Plateau, Hobert glanced at the boundless plain in the distance. That was Paw River Valley, a fertile land. A not-so-large river flowed through the valley beneath Hobert's feet. This section of the river was very steep, only a few tens of kilometers long, but the altitude drop was several hundred meters. In the valley behind Hobert, a dam was being built. That was the first hydropower station in this world. At this time, the dam body was only half built and was expected to be completed in the second half of next year. At that time, the construction team would divert the river in front of Hobert into the completed dam. During the previous wave of infrastructure construction, a batch of thermal power plants had already been built. However, with the widespread utilize of electric motors, electricity was increasingly used in factories. Currently, only town-level administrative units in Atlantis had electricity, and most rural areas were still using candles or oil lamps. Hobert sat on a rock, watching the people laboring on the construction site for more than 10 minutes. He had no intention of speeding up the construction of this hydropower station because it gathered many engineers and electricity department elites from the country. They still needed to accumulate experience from this hydropower station and then fill the vast area around Star Plateau with hydropower stations. Hobert did not intend to interfere with these construction works because they were all important but not urgent tasks, which he could let his bureaucratic agencies handle. After watching for a long time, Hobert finally got up. The next second, he had already arrived at the raging sea amidst thunder and rain. This was the sea area outside the safe lane in the raging sea, and many demigods dared not venture into these dangerous waters. Hobert slightly raised his hand, and the dark clouds that had permeated the sky for over 1,000 years dissipated, and sunlight once again shone on these deep blue sea surfaces. He changed the environment of the real world here, restoring the boundary between the real world and the underworld that had collapsed due to the fall of the underworld emperor over 1,000 years ago. This was the fundamental reason why the raging sea was raging. As Hobert moved forward, changing the natural laws of the raging sea, he took out a small glass bottle from the country of the anarchy. Inside the glass bottle was a flowing, expanding or contracting stream of information. Previously, after Bernadette sealed her father in Rosel's tomb on the mysterious island, she completed her promotion ritual. During the promotion process, Hidden Sage tried to mix a stream of information into Bernadette's body, but it was intercepted by Hobert. Hobert had kept this stream of information belonging to Hidden Sage to search for Hidden Sage when the time was right. The reason he first sought revenge on Primordial Demoness and then came to find Hidden Sage was that Hidden Sage seemed to have some association with knowledge more. Therefore, this evil god, who was suspected to be a living uniqueness, could reach the level of a god at certain times, even without a knowledge emperor characteristic. In certain specific environments, this was even more difficult to deal with than a true god. Hidden Sage, like Primordial Demoness, must have realized that Hobert would eventually come to settle accounts with him for everything that happened before. So, according to Hobert's association display, this evil god had hidden deep within the raging sea. Because he had no physical body, the harsh weather of the raging sea could not cause him any substantial harm. Using the connection of that information stream, Hobert gradually delved deep into the raging sea. Behind him, a vast sea area had returned to normal. These sea areas had a few scattered small islands. Because they hadn't seen the sun for over 1,000 years, they looked strangely rugged, with only some plants that relied on spirituality for nourishment and Beander plants surviving. At the same time, those few islands had long become a paradise for monsters, some of which were Beander creatures, and some were Beyonders who had lost control and escaped here using certain opportunities. Hobert searched unhurriedly forward and finally found a rolling stream of information in the clouds ahead. But that was not the true body of Hidden Sage, it was an information mass, used by Hidden Sage to mislead. Hobert smiled slightly. Of course, he knew that an evil god of this level was not that easy to find. If the first plan didn't work, he had another. Hobert held the glass bottle in one hand and took out a completely black eye from the country of the anarchy with the other. That was the eye obtained during the operation to save old Neil back then, and it was also the foundation of the 100-eyed demon monarch's existence. Hobert had previously tried to find the origin of this eye, but he saw knowledge more, and his head was instantly overwhelmed by a massive amount of knowledge. At that time, Hobert realized that Hidden Sage should be using some mystery prior beyonders to probe knowledge more or to search for knowledge more. It was very likely that shortly after that, Hidden Sage established an association with knowledge more, and only then did Hidden Sage gain the power of a god. 3 years later, Hobert once again injected his spirituality into the black eye, actively seeking knowledge more. Suddenly, the distant dark clouds turned fiery red, and a phantom fiery red giant eye appeared in the clouds. As the giant eye appeared, a mirage-like phantom scene emerged there. The main body was an endless moor, with a tall tower in the barrenness. At the top of the tower was a fiery red eyeball, gazing at the land. Suddenly, that eyeball seemed to sense Hobert's gaze, and it looked at Hobert. Hobert's body suddenly expanded, quickly revealing a black, handsome cloak and exquisite armor, like an emperor on a battlefield. Behind him appeared a phantom fairyland, where clouds and mist swirled, with high platforms, pavilions, and flowing water suspended in midair. In the pavilions, a quaint giant bell was faintly visible, like an eye that disdained everything. With every breath Hobert took, he influenced the rules of the surrounding sea area. Around him, some rules were severely distorted, while others became iron laws that no god could alter. Protected by the country of the anarchy in his mythical creature state, Hobert gazed at the giant eye without any pressure. Hobert soon realized that the scene before him was not the true knowledge more, but merely a projection of that Sephira in the real world. Although the seal on the west continent had been lifted, these Sephiras were clearly not truly liberated. However, for Hobert, a mere phantom was enough. He immediately let his spirituality touch that phantom, and at the same time, the glass bottle in his right hand shattered, releasing the stream of information belonging to Hidden Sage. With the power of the giant eye in knowledge more and the stream of information in his hand, Hobert's gaze rapidly pierced through the real world. He saw through the dark clouds of the raging sea and the mist of the fog sea. Finally, deep beneath the dark waters of the fog sea, he found a surging torrent of information. The seawater, sea fish, seabed plants, rocks, and sand, under the influence of that information torrent, all transformed into mystical information streams and flowed into the main information torrent. This massive information torrent sensed Hobert's gaze from afar and suddenly contracted. Hobert seemed to see the other party's nervousness and fear. The next second, Hobert altered his position, appearing in front of the information torrent. In his mythical creature state is half-a the anarchy, immense distorting power churned the surrounding seawater and seabed into a mass. The surging power even shattered the seawater, separating hydrogen, oxygen, and salt. From the surface of the fog sea, it looked like an enormous vortex, as if it would swallow the sky. Seabirds flying in the sky were instantly sucked into the vortex, leaving no trace. The surrounding islands, as fragile as piles of sand, were crushed from top to bottom. Hidden Sage was first intimidated by Hobert's mythical creature state. By the time he recovered, a portion of the information torrent had already been churned into fragmented numbers and symbols. At this point, Hobert's attack was not limited to the physical sense but also carried abstract blows. Hidden Sage chose not to resist, but instead allowed himself to transform into smaller vortices along the distorting force, and quickly used the churning power to fling those strings of characters away, reforming into an information torrent not far away. He had no intention of fighting Hobert. The surrounding space immediately became illusory, and he prepared to hide within the vast cosmic information torrent. From the perspective of high-sequence beyonders of the mystery prior pathway, the entire universe is composed of streams of information. Some symbols represent air, while others represent seawater. These symbols represent the most fundamental knowledge and are abstract basic units. This seawater and air constantly emit the light of knowledge, but people ignore it. Adding some numbers transforms them into vast expanses of air and seawater. Similarly, the essence of a planet is a giant information sphere, and the universe is a boundless ocean of information. They always believed that by finding the source of the universe's information streams, they could control the entire universe's operation. However, the information in this universe seems to be infinitely vast, and even the Hidden Sage couldn't untangle it. Yet, the hidden sage could escape by entering the information ocean. He would exist within every rock, every inch of soil, and every drop of seawater in the surrounding space. This is equivalent to him merging one string of his information with the information that makes up rocks, and another string with the information that makes up soil, thus introducing streams of information into surrounding objects. By then, he would be everywhere. Hobert, of course, would not let the hidden sage succeed. Everything around him instantly became chaos, like strings of garbled code. The hidden sage was stunned. Normally, he wouldn't pay attention to the garbled code before him, but at this moment, he realized that if he jumped into this garbled code, he would immediately lose himself, and his consciousness would become uncontrollable due to becoming garbled. He then bit the bullet and, using streams of information, shaped a man in a simple long robe, with pointed, high-set ears, a relatively soft facial contour, and holding a glowing spear. The hidden sage recreated the elf king, Sanayathsalium. This was a recreation at the level of a deity. For a moment, the vast sea seemed to welcome its monarch. Winds howled, waves surged, and the sky was overcast with dark clouds, lightning, and thunder. The giant vortex Hobert had formed in the sea was immediately taken over by the hidden sage. The torrent formed by the vortex, capable of eroding rocks into sand, began to wash over Hobert. Streams of pale giant lightning, like thick pythons, fell from high above, piercing into the water, accurately striking Hobert. But when these attacks reached Hobert's main body, they suddenly became chaos. The power of the torrent completely disappeared, and the thick silver-white lightning instantly returned to nothingness before Hobert. It was as if there was an Beyonder insulator in front of Hobert, isolating all Beyonder attacks before him. Rumble. The sea suddenly churned, forming a massive tsunami on the seabed. The tsunami surged powerfully, resembling a doomsday scene. This tsunami was indestructible, and it possessed an abstract sense of indestructibility. Hobert raised a hand and altered the tsunami's direction. Rumble. The surging tsunami headed towards the sky, and massive currents rushed into midair. On Lasha Island in the Fog Sea, within the Emerald Palace. Bernadette emerged from her palace, gazing thoughtfully at the southern sea. She could feel that a high-level battle was taking place there, stirring up the entire Fog Sea's spirituality. Captain. Suddenly, the voice of the Dawn's second mate rang in Bernadette's ears, but the second mate was not in the Emerald Palace but at the distant port. The second mate shouted in panic, "Captain! The port has suddenly dried up, and the Dawn has run aground in the port." Bernadette calmly hummed. Her eyes deepened, as if leading to an unknown space. She saw vast expanses of the ocean surge into midair. At this moment, heaven and earth seemed to be inverted. The sky became the seabed, and the sea surface became the sky. Connecting them was an endless waterfall. The laws of nature were invalid there. Water no longer flowed from high to low but began to flow from low to high. Immediately after, Bernadette prophesied, the massive currents would fall back into the sea, stirring up a towering wave. This wave would overturn ships, sweep over islands, and people would tremble in this massive disaster, losing even the courage and thought to pray. Seeing these scenes, Bernadette immediately ordered, "Prepare for a super-large tsunami." The tsunami surged into the sky, and that indestructible abstract attack even slammed into the clouds and air high above. Just as the hidden sage was struggling to seize control of the tsunami, a black longsword pierced through his chest. He was slightly stunned. Although he didn't turn around, he saw another Hobert appear behind him. This Hobert also had the state of a mythical creature, but his back did not have the projection of the country of the anarchy. That was Hobert's substitute. Hobert didn't utilize his substitute immediately this time precisely to attack the enemy by surprise. Struck by the order-slaying sword, the Elf King's image immediately collapsed, transforming back into a stream of information. A massive amount of chaos immediately appeared within these information streams, and the surging torrent of information instantly showed signs of collapse. At this instant, within the torrent of information, a colorful iris-like structure appeared, completely isolating all the garbled code, and the normal information formed a new torrent of information. However, this torrent of information was now only half its original size. Immediately after, the iris disappeared, and the garbled code scattered in all directions. The information of the surrounding object suddenly mutated, causing a massive chaos that swept across the entire world. Some sea fish had their body Parameters: impacted, with a few characters and numbers changed, so the originally palm-sized sea fish instantly became whale-sized, but its head remained only palm-sized. The information flow composing the island was impacted, and a few characters and numbers also changed. The island's area immediately expanded by more than 100 times, forming a giant island, which, however, floated in midair. The information flow composing the seawater was impacted. In short, from Hobert's perspective, it was as if everything before him was infected with a virus, and everything became stuck and disordered. But the hidden sage was also forced into a desperate situation by Hobert and his substitute. Far away in the raging sea, Katlia suddenly felt a spiritual sense. She quickly came to the deck, and almost at the same time she arrived, she heard the exclamations of the crew members. It turned out that Bosun Nina had suddenly turned into an Iron Man. Seeing Nina's frozen expression of horror, Katlia quickly understood the root of the problem. The part of the mystical symbols that made up Nina was suddenly disrupted by a symbol that appeared out of nowhere. Nina's body composition instantly changed from flesh and blood to steel. For Katlia, who had already advanced to sequence 3 inches mysticologist, of an adjacent pathway, this was not too difficult a problem to solve. Her hands became illusory, found the disordered mystical symbol, and changed it back to the correct mystical character. Nina immediately returned to normal. Storms above. Did I just turn into an Iron Man? Katlia didn't speak. Streams of information flowed in her eyes. She saw that many places in the surrounding world had experienced information the anarchy. Her current location should be at the edge of this information the anarchy, so only some strange things would appear. What had the center of this information the anarchy become? Suddenly, Katlia's heart was filled with fear and bewilderment. The unforgettable murmur appeared in her ears, instantly giving her a splitting headache, almost causing her to lose control. This murmur came from the hidden sage. Katlia didn't expect to still hear this voice even after switching to an adjacent pathway. Fortunately, this murmur was fleeting. Katlia's spirituality uncontrollably analyzed the murmur. The hidden sage was calling for help. This reminded her of the topics discussed at the Tarot Club. Katlia's heart was instantly deeply shaken. The hidden sage was blocked by Hobert's main body and substitute. Streams of information from his body immediately turned into square bricks, composed of rolling information. These information bricks immediately formed an impenetrable wall. This wall was a wall in an abstract sense. It was only one wall, yet it blocked Hobert's main body and substitute from different directions. The substitute, holding the order-slaying sword, tried to break through the information wall, but couldn't for a while. Hobert immediately realized that this information wall contained the power of the Sephira, knowledge more. The hidden sage used the power of the knowledge more with great restraint, because the more he used it, the more easily he would lose himself, and his consciousness would gradually be replaced by the knowledge more. But now, he clearly couldn't worry about that. Escaping was paramount. When the information wall was no longer so dense and was broken through by the substitute, the hidden sage's main body had already escaped into the information streams of the surrounding objects. Among these countless information streams, as long as one stream of information was not intercepted by Hobert, the hidden sage would not die. Hobert took a deep breath and made a fist, and instantly he appeared in midair. It wasn't that Hobert's position changed, but half of the fog sea disappeared, from hundreds of meters of air above to hundreds of meters underground, all vanished, without a trace. At this time, fierce winds howled above Hobert's head because about 1/10 of the air in the unsealed areas of this world was suddenly sucked out, and air from other regions flowed into this area, forming violent winds. And beneath Hobert's feet were surging, rolling magma, rocks, and groundwater. It was as if he had just peeled back this skin of the earth, revealing the flesh beneath the earth. The outer gods in the starry sky saw that the earth was suddenly no longer spherical, and a giant pit appeared on the fog sea. In fact, this air, seawater, etc., didn't disappear but were crumpled by Hobert into a small, palm-sized ball. This small ball had a layer of blue seawater on the outside, and solid parts like rocks inside. On this small ball, a terrified face was reflected. This face suddenly protruded, trying to escape the small ball, but was pressed back by Hobert. That terrified human face belonged to the hidden sage. He had hidden in the torrent of information that formed this planet, so Hobert balled up all the regions containing parts of the hidden sage. Hobert acted quickly, so he only needed to ball up half of the fog sea. At this time, the substitute came over. The order-slaying sword in his hand became dagger-sized and immediately pierced into the small ball in the main body's palm. The human face on the small ball dodged in terror, moving around, trying every means to hold on. So the substitute pulled out the order-slaying dagger, pierced it again from another angle, and then pierced it 3-4 times. By the 5th time, everything inside the small ball had become the smallest units that form all physical objects. The hidden sage also transformed from an information torrent into clumps of information, then into strings of information, and finally into individual characters and numbers struggling to combine. At this point, Hobert's main body acted again, altering the hidden sage into the smallest unit in an abstract sense, and used the law of Beander characteristics to instantly precipitate the Beander characteristic. As the hidden sage transformed into the smallest unit, in both physical and abstract senses, the uniqueness also left the hidden sage. Amid waves of unwilling emotions, the hidden sage fell. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.